You're watching Cable 2.
Good evening and welcome to the Winston-Salem Forsyth County Board of Education meeting for February the 23rd, 2021. I am Shay Woodbury, Chair of the Winston-Salem Forsyth County Board of Education. I'm going to call our meeting back to order from our closed session. We've already established a quorum, and so the next item is to do our Pledge of Allegiance and to do the invocation. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
May we bow our heads in prayer, please. We ask tonight that we are watched over as we make decisions affecting the life of our young people. We ask also that you look after our teachers, as they proceed to get their shots, and we ask that you look after our children when they all return back to school, which they are soon doing. Finally, we ask for your blessings upon everybody involved in Forsyth County education process, including our teachers, administrators, parents, and most of all, our children. Amen.
Our next agenda item is actually the agenda review. We need to make an amendment to the agenda. So for your consideration, we need to remove action item B because it was actually approved at our work session under new business. And then we need to add a discussion H and add an action item Q for SRO contract with the Sheriff's Office. Is there a motion?
Second.
Are there any further questions or discussion? Can we have a consensus for the agenda approval?
Aye.
Let it be known by aye. Thank you. So we have some special recognitions tonight. First, before we go to the board spotlight video, I would like to recognize our very own Dana Carter-Jones. Her birthday is this Thursday, February the 25th. I will not tell you what age she is. You couldn't guess it. She's definitely a very young-looking woman, and we hope that she has a very blessed and peaceful and happy birthday with her family. So now we will go to the board spotlight video. Do I need to okay, thank you.
It's Career and Technical Education Month. On behalf of all of us with Winston-Salem Forsyth County Schools, we would like to celebrate the value of CTE and the achievements and accomplishments of CTE programs across the district.
So I was looking for something to do, and I thought I could work with kids, something to make a difference in somebody's life, I hope. And ain't a minute difference in mine, too.
I mean, I'm carrying the precious cargo of everybody's children, so it's number one responsibility is safety. I think for a lot of people that are looking for their paycheck, this is a good way to do it.
You have your work in the mornings, you have your evenings off.
I enjoy it because I enjoy getting the summer off.
Don't have to work weekends, holidays off.
What do people not know about your job?
That is very, 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 very stressful sometimes, because you got so much responsibility on you. You got kids on the bus, you got to watch the traffic, people running your stop arms. It's just a lot.
It's a big responsibility, but you do everything you're supposed to do, it works out fine.
You see different children from all different types of life, walks of life.
Because I see kids from one year to the next for a while they're on my run.
And it's rewarding. When you see them go from kindergarten to middle school and
Seeing them from year to year and seeing them grow up a little bit.
they remember when you see you in the store and stuff, it just does something. We are extension of the school, but how many teachers work with their back to their class? And all they have is a mirror.
So it's a lot of responsibility, but it's a rewarding job.
And I mean, it's not for everybody. School bus driving is not for everybody. I mean, you got to you got to be dedicated to it.
People need to learn from the history. They need to know it and then learn from it. It's just important. You have to know where you've been to know where you're going.
How old were you in 1958?
7 years old. The first day of going to East High Elementary, there were many photographers, documenting our arrival. And we also had police there too. It was like I didn't fit in. I didn't fit in with the whites. I didn't fit in with the blacks. We were just subjected to a lot of ugly things, mainly outside of school though. I don't remember ugly things happening inside the school building, but we would have rock fights after school in the back of the school. You're never really at ease, but I always felt like I had something to prove. And so I really tried to excel. And so I did well academically, I did. So when I went on to Hill, I was the first black and the only black in that school. And that was for 2 years until my brother and sister came here at Hill. I taught with a teacher later on that was there, and he said every time he saw me, I looked like a deer in headlights. So I know that there were a lot of children that I went to school with whose family were members of the Klan. It was just always, I felt like I was on a tightrope, walking a tightrope, just trying to keep the peace and do well. I was first black in the National Honor Society at Parkland. And I shared with you that I wrote the alma mater. So I feel like I made a contribution. Even when we have class reunions, the way I'm remembered makes me feel good. I have been a guidance counselor for 24 years. Right now, I'm serving as the full-time counselor at Morgan Elementary. I felt like it was a calling. When I initially became a counselor, and I was at a Title I school, I had no doubt that I was there to give hope to the students, just to encourage them that regardless of what stereotypes or whatever categories that they might be lumped in, that they were not that, that they had some options and some choices, and I felt that I was called to help equip them to succeed.
You can see it in your eyes how much those kids mean to you. How much do they mean to you?
I don't have words. I may not say it, but I'll show you, yeah. Good afternoon, boys and girls. I'm hoping that, they're going to be productive citizens, that they're going to stand up for what's right, speak against what's wrong. My mantra is really the golden rule, so the kids know, that I'm going to ask them, what is the golden rule? And I just expect them to act that out. And not just when I come into the class either. It's good to see you. I remember you. I'm glad. That's just core to my being, to be of assistance, to be able to help or to serve. I did my best. Hopefully I helped somebody along the way.
I'd like to say thank you to our communications team for putting together a very wonderful spotlight. On behalf of the board, I would like to say we definitely appreciate our CTE teachers and the business community that enables us to have such a strong CTE department. I would also like to definitely say we appreciate bus drivers. I think any of us who have ever had the opportunity to ride a public school bus, that is an opportunity and an experience you never forget. So I have fond memories being on the bus. And lastly, I would just really like to thank Ms. Corley for sharing her story, which complements, of course, Black History Month. So thank you again. Next on our agenda is the public comments on agenda items. At this time, we will hear public comments only on agenda items. Please know that we reserve this time to hear comments only on the items that are on tonight's agenda, either for action or discussion. When you are called upon to speak, step up to the green X at the podium. Direct your comments to me as the chair, and know that while we are not able to respond, I may direct you to a staff member who can answer questions when appropriate. We do ask that you be respectful, kind, and know we cannot talk about sensitive and private student or personnel information in this public setting. While we hope it does not, should the comments become personal attacks, contentious, or otherwise disruptive, I do reserve the right to end the comment period. You will have 3 minutes to speak, and if you have more to share, always know that you can reach out by email directly. So first we have Ms. Michelle Jordan. Is she? Oh, yes, I can. I'm sorry about that. Rhonda Mays we'll have first, since you all are here in person. I forget we usually go in person first.
Good evening,
Good
Chairwoman Woodbury, the board, and Mrs. McManus. I'm Rhonda Mays. I'm a school social worker here in the district and immediate past president of Forsyth County Association of Educators. And the reason I mentioned that is, you noticed for the past 2 years I have not mentioned that. But I'm mentioning it because of the fact that I was around and very much a part of the superintendent meetings, those community meetings and the different things that we did in order to go through that process of selecting our superintendent, our last one. So, that is still fresh in my mind. So I know it has to be fresh in majority everyone who's sitting up here on the board currently mind. And so you already know what to do and what to look for. And we have such strong community relationships and community partners, we can have one of our community partners to facilitate that process. Because you have the roadmap. And the only thing you have to do is just go back through it and implement that process. I am asking you to please take a good look and go and look into yourselves and know that you have the knowledge and the skills of doing this selection process without spending thousands of dollars for an agency or group to do that for you. You know what you're doing. You just did it. So please take that in consideration when you're thinking about what that process will be. We don't need to continue to spend thousands of dollars on a process that you already know. I have faith in you. Thank you and have a good evening.
Thank you. Next, we have Keisha Williams.
Good evening, Madam Chair,
Good
school
evening.
board members, interim superintendent McManus. My name is Keisha Payne Williams, and I stand before you this evening to speak about the selection of our next superintendent of Winston-Salem Forsyth County Schools. When I began my career in education over 20 years ago, right here in this district, our district was a premier district. We had educators who were doing everything they could to get right here in our district. Over the years, our popularity and prominence has slowly dwindled to where we are now in a heavy battle with neighboring districts to not only keep our quality educators, but we are struggling to attract diverse talent. It is without question that our district is in dire need of a leader dedicated to bringing Winston-Salem Forsyth County Schools back to its premium positioning. We need a superintendent who fervently believes, one, that our students are the ultimate client in this business that we call education, and two, that the gaps of opportunity within our district heavily hinder academic success across the board. Our new superintendent needs to not just be aware of the complexities that come with our district, such as ours, but have a proven record of effectively navigating such challenges. This new leader must be empathetic to the needs of not just our students, but our teachers and our educational support personnel. And they must be able and have the ability to be a bipartisan decision maker who surrounds themselves with stakeholders who represent every aspect of our district. In closing, it is my hope that this board thoroughly and effectively screen and select a visionary leader willing to stay the course, put in the work, and see us through to a better future. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Colleen Lupina.
Good evening, Chair Woodbury,
Good evening.
Superintendent McManus, and board members. My name is Colleen Lupina, and I would like to discuss concerns I have about COVID policy and equity. Some of you continually voted to postpone bringing our students back into the buildings. Your decisions have made things especially difficult for our high school students. My son is a sophomore, and yesterday was his first day back in the school building for almost an entire calendar year. His high school has 4 cohorts, and he was the only student in 3 out of his 4 classes yesterday. I am here tonight to assure you that many high schoolers are desperate to be back in the classroom, but relatively few opted to return because being in school only 4 days a month is just not worth it to many families. I urge you to do away with the cohorts in our school district wherever possible. It makes no sense for my son and other students to sit in a classroom all by themselves or with only 1 or 2 other students, which is what is happening at many of our schools. Please allow these students who opted to return the opportunity to be in the building as much as possible. Your decision to keep our schools closed as long as you have has had an inequitable effect on our minority students, English language learners, and students from low-income homes. One of our district's core values is accountability, and I would like to publicly request that you be transparent with parents and taxpayers about the effects this year of remote learning has had on our students. I ask that you share a report on the district website at the end of this school year that includes achievement scores for 2021 by subgroups, the dropout rate, and the retention rate for each grade. I also ask that you provide the same data for the year of 2018-19 for comparison. I'm also concerned that the district is not providing transportation to students in the HAG program. HAG is not a magnet program. These students have qualified for special instructional services and should be able to receive that instruction in person if they desire. Our school district website promises to provide transportation to the HAG sites. It is ironic that you are denying transportation to these students at the very time we are trying to identify more underrepresented students into the AIG program, as you will hear about tonight in the equity report. And yet what you are telling our current HAG students is that unless your family has a vehicle and a parent who is not working and can provide you with transportation 2 times a day, you can't come back in person. This is inequitable to all of our HAG students, but especially to our underrepresented students. I hope you will change that policy immediately and begin providing transportation to any HAG student who wants to attend in person. Thank you so much for your consideration of these issues.
Thank you. Next, we have Mr. Jabbar. who is our new president of the NAACP. I don't think he has been up in that capacity, so congratulations, Mr. Jabbar.
Thank you very much, Chair Woodbury, and good evening, Chair Woodbury, Ms. McManus, and the remainder of the board. I hope you had a pleasant week this far. I wanted to speak on B, and I see that it was scratched. And I was at the workshop, and I didn't know any conclusions have been reached at the workshop that did not warrant discussion here before the full body. So let me share something with you on that line. Years ago, I was an AAU coach. We had a standard of 2.0. We had a tryout. A kid was probably the best player in the tryout, but he was below 2.0, and we could not let him play. It is not fair that other kids bust their butt to maintain a 2.0 and above. But yet, and this is what happens. I run into so many kids that you slide them through just because they're a good athlete. That's not right. I don't see what you're going to accomplish by wavering something that's already in the state. What is this all about? Are we talking about academics? Are we talking about a student athlete, or are we just talking about athletics? I think you need to consider very strongly. And usually when something goes all the way over off the discussion to a approval, somehow it has already been decided. But I warn you that you cannot allow a certain section of kids that's in athletics to get a waiver when you're not allowing other kids to get a waiver if they are failing. Think about it. Think about it. And we'll talk about, well, it's an emotional thing for kids, and Lord have mercy. Life is emotional. We need to understand academics are important to our kids, and when we begin to show them that we're going to give them a back door, then that's what they're going to start to expect. I thank you for your time. I hope you consider and think about this before you make your decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jabbar. Next, we have Ms. Michelle Jordan, who's online. Okay, next we have Reverend Dr. Charlotte Leach. I hope I pronounced your name correctly.
Maybe call her one more time. I see her called in. I don't know.
Okay, Reverend Dr. Charlotte Leach.
Well, and the third one on your list is not online either, so maybe one last call for Ms. Leach.
Okay, Reverend Dr. Charlotte Leach. Are you present? Are you on? Are you able to?
I can send her a text, I guess. I see her in the Teams meeting, so I can
Okay.
maybe text her and see.
Yes,
Okay,
if you
we'll
could do that.
Circle back after a while or something.
Okay,
Actually, she just hung up. She just hung up. So
okay. So
I'm sorry.
do we have anybody appear to be on now?
No, ma'am. Not from the call-ins. I was thinking maybe she would jump back in. We're just having trouble.
Okay,
I don't
we
see her.
can
I don't see her
just-
calling back.
Yeah, we can maybe bring them back in at the open comments if they're available, if they call back in. So we will go to our discussion items. And the first discussion item is the internal audit report by Dixon Hughes Goodman LLP. Tyler Beatty, who is the senior manager, will lead our discussion. I think they're online.
She just called in.
Hello.
Hello?
Okay, they can hear us.
Hey, Tyler, you want me to get it started?
That's fine.
Okay. It is a pleasure to be with you all this evening to share the results from your audit for the year ending 6/30/2020. You'll probably remember, it doesn't feel like it was that long ago that we were here to discuss the results of the audit from 2019. This year, the audit did go much better. And in fact, I think this is probably one of the first years in quite some time that you met the LGC reporting deadline. That deadline was extended this year because of COVID-19, and you did meet that deadline. So it is our pleasure to be with you here this evening to review the results from the audit and answer any questions that you might have. So with me today is Paige Alford. Paige is a manager in our group, and she does work with school board audits across the state of North Carolina. And she was the manager on the audit for the Winston-Salem Forsyth County Schools. And also with me is Tyler Beatty, who is a senior manager in our group and was very instrumental in making sure that we hit the deadlines and were able to get everything wrapped up. And so Tyler is going to walk you through some information. Instead of going through the detailed financial statements, we've prepared a PowerPoint presentation that we'll share with you this evening. And then we will all three be available to answer questions at the conclusion of the presentation.
Thanks, April. And as you mentioned, we're happy to be with you all tonight and presenting a little earlier than the past few years, albeit in a virtual environment. Before we get started in the material, I would like to thank Andrea and the finance team for the assistance they provided during this year's audit. This year has presented many challenges to the audit process, and the finance team has done an excellent job of working through these issues to help us complete our testing in a timely manner. You should have received copies of the financial statements and our communications report to the board, which will be discussed in this presentation. These reports have been submitted to the local government commission and they have been approved. Also, it's important to note that our audit would have been completed even earlier this year had it not been for delays in the release of the compliance supplement provided by the Office of Management and Budget, which is used to complete our compliance testing. Next slide, please. Here is a quick overview of our agenda. We'll start with a discussion of the audit results. We'll then move to the communication to the board report and then the financial highlights. Lastly, we'll conclude with a review of our compliance audit. Next slide. So now we'll discuss the audit results. Next slide, please. All of the hard work that everyone contributes to the audit is primarily to enable us to issue an opinion on the financial statements. On this slide, I have an excerpt of our audit opinion, which is considered an unmodified opinion. This is the opinion that you want to receive, and it gives financial statement users an indication that the information is materially accurate in the financial statements. Next slide, please. And so now we'll talk about the communications to the board. Next slide. So there are various aspects of the audit process that we're required to communicate to the board. The most significant are if there were any sensitive estimates or significant disclosures in the financial statements. We've identified these as being the useful lives of depreciable assets and the proportionate share of the net pension liability and OPEB liabilities for the retirement plans. If there were any difficulties or disagreements with management that occurred during the audit process, we would communicate those to you in this report. We're happy to report that we didn't have any difficulties or disagreements with management during the course of the audit. Similarly, if there were any uncorrected misstatements that were identified during the course of the audit, We would communicate those here in this report. We did have certain journal entries that were identified and corrected as part of the audit. We did not have any misstatements that were uncorrected. Lastly, representations made by management. Upon completion of our audit, you will see this communication report, and it includes the management representation letter that is signed by management so that you can see what representations were given to us during the course of our audit. Next slide, please. Now we'll move to the financial highlights. Instead of having you thumb through the 87-page financial statement document, we've pulled out the most relevant information and presented it in graphical form. Also, we've included the current year as well as the prior 2 years for comparative analysis. Next slide, please. So this next slide is your revenues, and it's your general and special revenue, your state revenue, and your federal revenues. So your general revenues, which is the orange bar on the very left side, includes Fund 2 and Fund 8 revenues. You'll realize that the board saw an increase of $6.9 million in fiscal year 2020 related to your Fund 2 and Fund 8 revenues. Related to this increase includes $8.6 million increase in county appropriations, as well as a $1.6 million decrease in special revenues recognized in Fund 8. The decrease in the special revenues or Fund 8 money is primarily related to timing of program expenditures. Any excess in revenues over expenditures is recorded as an unearned revenue to be used in the subsequent year. Your state public school funding, which is the blue bar in the middle of the graph, is obviously the largest funding source of the board. This funding increased $8 million when compared to the previous year. State public school fund allotments are based on ADM data. Also of note, there was an increase to the state salary schedule this year, as well as increases into the retirement and other benefit rates, which plays into a component of this increase. These increases in state salary schedule, as well as retirement and other benefit rates, also have to be funded with local dollars for employees who are not funded with state or federal funding. Lastly, your federal funding decreased slightly, which is the gray bar on the very right of the graph, and it decreased approximately $794,000 in the current year. Your total schedule of federal and state awards can be found on page 78 of the financial statements. Next slide, please. So this next slide shows your general, state, and federal expenditures by purpose code as a percentage of total expenditures for those funds. And so this slide is trying to give you a good visual representation of where monies are being spent each year. You'll notice that the board spent around 84% in instructional services, with the remaining 16% being spent on operational services. We would expect consistency from year to year in this allocation, also with the greatest proportion being allocated to instructional services. Obviously, this slide indicates consistency. Also, it's important to note that the board was able to maintain this consistency even with the increase in costs related to the COVID pandemic. And we've noticed slight variations and further decreases with other LEAs. Next slide, please. So this next slide details your fund balance, your total fund balance for your Fund 2, which is your general fund, and Fund 8, which is your special revenue fund, for this year and the prior 2 years. You'll notice that your combined fund balance for Fund 2 and Fund 8 has increased $4.5 million in 2020 when compared to 2019, but it's still not quite as high as the balance was at June 30th, 2018. The increase in fund balance for this year was related to a $3.2 million increase in Fund 2 and a $1.3 million increase in Fund 8. Your total available fund balance is the gray bar within, and the difference between your total fund balance and your total available fund balance is restricted amounts for inventory balances as well as stabilization amounts that are required to be restricted by the state of North Carolina. The details of the differences between your total available and unassigned can be found on page 13 of the financial statements. And your difference between your total available and your unassigned fund balance is your assigned fund balance, which is related to Fund 8. We always recommend that the board take a pointed approach when there's a decision to utilize fund balance. Our general recommendation is that fund balance should not be used to pay for recurring expenditures and a plan should be put in place to build it back up when it's spent. We believe that the additional COVID money coming in this fiscal year is giving LEAs an opportunity to continue to build fund balance. Furthermore, we recommend that this new program money should be used to pay for one-time expenses as much as possible. Also, it's important to note that there are no state mandated thresholds for LEAs for fund balance. Next slide, please. Lastly, here's a snapshot of your school food service fund. You'll notice that cash decreased slightly, approximately $158,000 when compared to the prior year. The liabilities presented for this fund are significantly comprised of the net pension and net OPEB liabilities related to the state retirement plans. Revenues decreased right around $2.4 million, while food costs and expenses decreased $2.5 million. These decreases are almost solely related to the pandemic and the closure of schools in March of 2020, as well as $2 million of federal funding that was received through the Coronavirus Relief Fund Act to assist with food serving costs during the pandemic. Next slide, please. As noted previously, in addition to our financial statement audit, we also conduct a compliance audit over federal and state programs which are deemed to be major. The criteria for determining a major program is set by auditing standards, and it's based upon various testing and coverage thresholds. Next slide, please. So based on our analysis, we noted 3 major federal programs which were required to be audited. These were the Title I grants, the special education cluster programs, and the Coronavirus Relief Fund. We have no reportable findings as a result of our testing of these programs. Next slide. We also noted 2 state programs that are deemed to be major and were required to be audited. These were the State Public School Fund and the State COVID-19 Supplemental Funds. Once again, we had no reportable findings as a result of our testing of these programs. Lastly, as part of government auditing standards, we're required to evaluate the board's compliance with laws and regulations, contracts, and grant agreements. Included in the financial statements is what's known as our Yellow Book report, which summarizes the results of this. We did have 3 findings this year, as noted in our Yellow Book report. The first one was a budget finding, which was isolated, and it was around additional accrual that was needed for expenditures in Fund 2 that was identified after the fiscal year 2020 budget was finalized. Because of this accrual that needed to be made at June 30th, 2020, it created the budget violation that was disclosed as a finding in this report. The second finding was related to a deficit in fund balance for the capital outlay fund as well as the daycare fund. You'll note on page 16 of the financial statements that the capital outlay fund recognized an increase in fund balance of $563,000 this year, which is a significant improvement. However, there's still a fund balance deficit at June 30th, 2020, which is why this was reported as a finding. The daycare fund deficit was strictly the result of program operations having to be halted because of the pandemic. The last finding was related to delays in the submittal of the 2019 data collection form. We're happy to report that the 2020 data collection form has already been submitted and it's already been accepted by the Federal Audit Clearinghouse before this year's deadline. And the board's responses and corrective actions to these identified findings can be found on page 76 of the financial statements. Next slide, please. And that's all we have. We're happy to open it up to questions for the board now.
Thank you. Was there a page, so I don't know if we had the whole, did we have that whole presentation?
There wasn't a slide when he started talking about the findings.
Yeah.
There wasn't a slide for that.
Do you have a different presentation than we did? I just want to make sure that we saw the same thing that you were seeing, and if, I know it's in the book, but I wondered about the presentation itself.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's in our board book information.
Okay.
Yeah. It's linked.
So there should have been, I guess, 3 materials included: the board presentation, as well as the communication reports that we discussed, and the entire financial statement.
Yep. Thank you.
Are there any other questions, comments? Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, I have. In the first finding, it said that we expended more for leadership and public relations and non-program charges. Will we have will we be able to find out where those differences were? I just want to make sure if it is in our leadership, if it's in salaries or whatever, that we're not, that we make sure that that's not going to be an ongoing issue with our present structure. So can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, so if you look on page 19 of the financial statements, you'll see a budget for your general fund, which is your original budget, your final budget, and then your actual amounts. And that variance with final budget, favorable or unfavorable, is where you'll see the budget violations for policy, leadership, and public relations, as well as your non-program charges on page 19 of the financial statements. Once again, these were related to accruals that were identified subsequent to year end that had to be recorded as of June 30th, 2020 as a payable amount. And since they had to be recorded as of 6/30/2020, they were identified after your final budget. That's what was creating the budget violation for this year. In any event, we didn't notice any budget violations that were related to something outside of an accrual.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry. So this is Board Member Jones. To put this kind of, I guess, in perspective, so we had 3 findings, budget violations or findings this year. Typically, I guess question 1, what would a district about this size with this many entries and this much in their different funds typically find? Is 3 over the top? That's like a normal finding that you would have when you would do an audit like this?
Right. No, good question. I think it's hard to compare apples to apples for LEAs from one to the other. Obviously, in certain instances, we have pervasive issues where we see budget violations that aren't easily explained. I think in this instance, you could look back to your 2019 financial statements and read over the findings from 2019. And I think it was pretty easy to conclude, once again, if you look at the findings from 19 to 2020, the significant improvement that the board has realized in fiscal year 2020. And once again, when we notice a budget violation as part of audit testing, our next step in that is to determine what caused the budget violation, right? And once again, these appear to be isolated incidents related to additional payables that needed to be reported that were identified after the budget had been finalized for 2020. It wasn't related to any pervasive issues that we saw where expenditures were being incurred that didn't appear to be within board policy or the budget.
Thank you for clarifying that. And I just have really one comment, and that's for a large portion of that last year, I served as the finance chair, and I know how hard our CFO, Andrea Gillis, has worked since she has been here in the district. And I would say she really came into a department that needed a lot of tender love and care and structure and work. And so, as a board member and as serving as the finance chair that year, I just want to thank her for her hard work and for really all that she has put into our department. I would say that we, it's since her arrival in the district, it was really the first time in many years of my time on the board that we, as a board member, felt like we had some confidence in the numbers and where we were. And I think that's very significant in your findings as well as through the audit. But thank you so much, Andrea, for your leadership in finance for our district.
Yeah, once again, I think we would concur. And as April mentioned earlier, this was one of the first years, I think, in recent history that we've been able to release and submit the audit before the LGC deadline. And I guess, once again, to reiterate, the budget violations were because of accruals, right? And so sometimes you have invoices that come in late. These were identified by Andrea. They weren't identified as part of audit procedures. but we had to record those as of accounts payable as of June 30th, 2020, which is what created the budget violation. So isolated incidents, we're aware of what caused them, and we're confident that moving forward, we wouldn't have, it feels like processes have been put in place to consider this for fiscal year 2021.
This is Board Member Kaplan. So I appreciate, and yes, it is so much better. And I just want to ask, and I know you mentioned this, I just want to clarify it. So you did audit the CARES dollars and the grant monies. All of that was included in your audit.
Yes, the coronavirus relief funds, which came through PRC 125, and it would show on your schedule of state and federal awards, they were subject to audit procedures in accordance with the uniform guidance. And then your state COVID money, which was PRC 154, was subject to compliance procedures in accordance with the State Audit Implementation Act.
Okay.
And we didn't have any findings to report as a result of the compliance testing of those programs.
Okay, thank you.
I don't think we have any more questions or discussion, unless you all have some additional information, Tyler. All right.
I think that's it. Yeah.
Hey.
I was just going to add, we appreciate your time. Our contact information is in that report to the board, the first page. So if anything comes up, questions, clarifications, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We'd be happy to help.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next item on our discussion, and I want to thank Mr. Jabbar for helping me to realize, I think I made a mistake when I actually said that we were going to remove action item B, not discussion B. So discussion B is still on. We removed action item B. So the next discussion item is the athletics eligibility update and Winston-Salem Forsyth County School Policy 6145, the 2.0 GPA requirement. John Sullivan, the athletics director, will lead us in discussion.
Good evening, everyone.
Good
Chair
evening.
Woodbury, Ms. McManus, members of the board, thank you for allowing us here tonight. I'm here to give an update and hopefully clarify some of the athletic eligibility issues that we have and they're going on around the state. In order to start, I'm going to go back to the end of last year. So in the early spring, early summer, the State Board of Education granted athletic eligibility to all students for this school year's first semester. That was provided that they were promoted by the local LEA. So all of our kids were eligible for the first semester. They did say that for the second semester, the traditional academic standards would be applied. So I'm going to walk you through the traditional standards. So, and this slide has a lot on it because it's a whole page in their handbook. So just real quick, there are two eligibility standards that we need to apply to our students here in Winston-Salem. The first one is the North Carolina High School Athletic Association 1.2.6. Students are required to be passing a minimum load, and in our district, that's 3 out of 4 block classes. Now, they make a couple of statements in here, such as, if you're eligible at the start of the semester, you remain eligible for the entire semester. It also says if you are ineligible at the start of the semester, you remain ineligible for the entire semester. They do allow one exception for students to, there's an 8-day window at the end of the grading period, at the end of the first semester, where if a student is given an incomplete by a teacher during that window, and there is a plan set by the teacher and the administration to remedy that grade, turn in late work, retake assessments, whatever it might be, that grade can be changed and eligibility can be changed. But that is the one exception that they allow for. But the grade has to be an incomplete during that 8-day window. So after the students are determined who's ineligible by North Carolina high school standards, we then go to the students that are now eligible, and we must apply a 2.0 to those students. So the students that have now survived the state rules are now on the team. We then require them to have a 2.0. So basically, they need to have a C average to be eligible. If the student falls below a 2.0, our policy allows for tutoring to occur. We call it the Academic Support Program, ASP as it's known in the schools. So the students can be tutored to maintain that 2.0 throughout the quarters for eligibility purposes. So they're not automatically ineligible under our policy because we have the tutoring option. So, you know, these are the issues that we've been talking about with athletic directors. So with me tonight are Sean Vestal, the athletic director at North Forsyth, and Bernard Williams, the head football coach. And our schools have spent some time working with our students throughout the year, trying to figure out how we're going to get the most students eligible that we can, the ones that have shown up and gotten online and been a part of the academic program. So Sean's going to come up and talk about it from the athletic director standpoint, and then Bernard's going to speak to the coach's standpoint.
Good evening, Chair Woodbury, Superintendent McManus, and fellow board members. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to come here tonight to discuss these issues that we have in front of us. I'm pretty much just going to talk about what we did at North Forsyth High School this year. I'm pretty sure most athletic directors probably did the same thing. I think there's probably maybe a little bit of differences within the schools based on the demographics and based on what we're dealing with, but this is just what worked for us this year. We started off doing some early attendance and early academic checks. We started off with constant contact on engagement with student support team at North Forsyth High School with our CARES team. We also constantly was questioning who has internet, the computer access, Canvas navigation, and also Zoom issues, because that's the platform we use at North. We also had constant contacts with parents and students about issues that they were having. And then two things particular to North Forsyth High School. Our relationships with our athletes, with our coaches, is absolutely amazing. I think our athletes really respect the coaches that we have in place at North Forsyth, and I think that made a difference. And also, with myself doing these early warning systems and the coaches taking a very proactive stance with the issues that we had, I think we caught a lot of problems very early. So some things that I just want to sit here and talk to you about was athletics started in September. So when September started, we started working with the fall athletes particularly. So that would have been your cheerleaders, your volleyball players, your football players, and your soccer. So those were the ones that were allowed on the campus at first. The reason I say that is because that gave the ADs and our coaches a good indication of what athletes were interested in playing football, especially with this COVID situation that we had in front of us. In early October, athletic directors started doing what we called initial academic and attendance checks based on the COVID protocols that we had. We always had the check-in sheets. So with those check-in sheets, we knew who was coming on a regular basis. So with knowing who was coming on a regular basis, it gave me an opportunity to make sure I was keeping up and doing the constant checks. Mid-October, we got an email from Q Tucker and the North Carolina High School Athletic Association stating that fall semester grades would determine eligibility for our spring semester. So just like anything in a typical year. Well, when that happened, I think we kind of put things in overdrive a little bit because we didn't know if they were going to let everybody be eligible. And then when we finally got that news, we had to sit back and say, okay, where are we really standing at this point in time? And honestly, this is where we were standing. We did eligibility checks for volleyball, football, soccer, men's and women's basketball, cross country, and cheerleading because they were the sports that at that point in time, at the end of quarter one, was on campus doing the checks. So at that point in time, with all the checks that we had and all the students that we had, I figured out all the athletes that had a D, had an F, and also had attendance issues. Attendance issues, in my opinion, would have been at least 10 or more days absent within a certain class. So once I got that information, I sat down with the head coaches that had players or athletes or student athletes that were having some issues. So I sat down with the coaches so we could try to figure out what can we do at this point in time. The first thing I did was I gave, with Coach Williams, he'll talk about this in a little bit, but I gave each coach the course, the grade, how many days absent, and more importantly, we went into grades and we looked at how many zeros and how many 50s that kids were having, because we were understanding that a lot of these assignments were not being completed. So now we got to figure out why were they not being completed. So at that point in time, we also gave the coaches the teacher's name so they could contact the teacher, find out what these coaches could do, find out the communication with the teacher. At North Forsyth, our coaches and teachers work tremendously well together, and I think that's a good thing that we have at our school. I'm going to let Coach talk about what he did with football here in a little bit, but I do want to tell you a success story that I think we had in men's soccer. Our men's soccer team is 99% Hispanic. So this is one of the target groups that every time you turn around, people are always talking about and want to discuss about. So my soccer coach, Dan Proctor, does an unbelievable job on and off the field with these gentlemen. And what we did was, when we started workouts in September, we had 20 returning players. So that was our target group. So we had 20 players. I think the state rule was 25 that we could have in a group. So we had 20, counting the coaches. So what we did with those 20 people is at the end of quarter one, when we did the checks, we realized that 14 of those 20 would have been ineligible. So let me say that again. At the end of quarter one, when I did the checks, 14 of those 20 were going to be ineligible athletes if we did not do something as a school and as an athletic program and as an athletic director. So what I did was, myself and the coach, we sat down to try to figure out what can we do. Well, for us, this is what we decided along with Coach Proctor. He was having 2 workouts a week. We took them from 2 workouts a week to 1 workout a week. So they were working out on Mondays and Wednesdays. So Monday, they were doing their workouts, but Wednesday, we would not let them come on campus, and we asked them to kind of do peer mediation with each other, help each other out when it came to academics, work with each other, because if you don't get this fixed, you guys are not going to have a season. Well, at North Forsyth, we have a really good soccer team. I mean, we are advancing in the playoffs. I want to say 14 years straight they've been in the playoffs. So we sat there and said, if you don't fix this, we're not going to have a team. So I think when we did that, we gave them a 2-week notice. We said, you've got 2 weeks to improve this. And if you don't improve it, we're shutting you down altogether. We're going to take the ball away from you. There'll be no sports with soccer. We're going to shut it down until your grades improve. Luckily, we didn't have to do that. Grades started improving, so we checked them again in 2 weeks. Grades started improving, which was absolutely good. And then here's the amazing part. Those 14 kids or student athletes that were on the verge of being ineligible, every single one of them are playing soccer right now. So all 20 of them are eligible. All 14 of those that were failing at least 2 classes at the end of quarter one figured it out. If you have the question, how did they figure out? I think a lot of it was internet issues. I think a lot of it was trying to navigate with the new Canvas platform that we were using. But there again, with the help of each other and having a little bit of accountability within our programs, I think that kind of fixed that issue. So I feel like that at North Forsyth, we did a very proactive approach. We had early warning systems that were in place, and the relationships that my coaches have with the athletes. I just think you add all that together with everything else that was going on, and we were very, very, very successful. We only had a handful of ineligible athletes, and we have, if I'm not mistaken, 9 sports is what we had, counting JV, and we had a small percentage of ineligible athletes that set right up with what we always have in a normal non-COVID year. So now I'll turn it over to Coach Williams to allow him to speak about what he did.
Good evening, Chair Woodbury,
Good
Superintendent McManus, and fellow board members. First, I would like to say thank you for the awesome job that you're doing in your leadership of Forsyth County Schools. And thank you also for allowing me to speak tonight. During the month of September of 2020, Coach Vesta and I met, as he already stated, to discuss eligibility of our student athletes. We were then able to identify academics and attendance issues. At the end of October, at the end of quarter one, we were able to identify 25 student athletes, football student athletes, who was in jeopardy of missing the spring football season due to failing grades. Currently, our football program consists of 99 99% black and brown students, whom we are extremely proud of. My staff and I immediately took action. We met with those student athletes. During the time, we asked them not to return to workouts. Workouts during this time was only on on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So we asked them not to return to workouts for a period of 2 weeks. Then we could reevaluate their attendance and their grades. We also scheduled one-on-one meetings with those student athletes who are in jeopardy of missing the season to create an action plan. I also assigned each coach one of those students so they can check on them regularly, not just for academics, but also to see how they were doing during this COVID situation, to check in on their moms and dads, just to see how they were doing. But we also discussed attendance, grades, missing assignments, teachers' office hours, tutoring, and remediation. The assistant head coach and I continuously meet each week to monitor the progress of our student athletes. Our primary focus is to ensure that our seniors graduate, our underclassmen remain eligible for the 2021 fall season, which is quickly approaching. Out of the 25 student athletes that we had identified that was in jeopardy of being ineligible for the season, 23 of them ended up being eligible for the season. To me, that is a huge success story and accomplishment for my student athletes. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So quickly run through some statistics here of what's going on in our county. So right now we have 193 student athletes who have been declared ineligible by the North Carolina High School Athletic Association standards. And in a typical year, it's double what a typical year is. Typically, it's around 90 students. So it's been a challenge for sure for our schools and our coaches, but we're continuing to work through it. This is our academic support and the schools and how many each school has. We currently have 212 students who don't meet the 2.0 regulation and are in our ASP program, being tutored on a daily or a weekly basis to maintain eligibility so they can participate. Now, one of the biggest complaints we're hearing is that because of the COVID situation we're dealing with, this is requiring 3 more hours of screen time for these students. And that's been a challenge all year long, getting attendance in classes and stuff with the online. So that's one of the things we're dealing with. And so here's some other stats. Roughly, we have 5,000 student athletes who partake in athletics here in Winston-Salem Forsyth County Schools. On a 3-year average, approximately 90 of those students, or 2%, are typically ineligible in any given year. Currently, we have 2,000 students competing in 114 teams in 6 different sports. There are, as I said, 193 by NCAA standards and 212 that could be. Now, they're not because our schools are doing the ASP program, so that's where we stand, and we're working through it. And so we're here to recommend that the board waive the 2.0 GPA requirement in Policy 6145 for the remainder of this school year, so our students can concentrate. Part of the thing we're dealing with right now is this semester, this determines your eligibility for next fall. So they're not, and this isn't new, this is unusual for a lot of our teams who are participating because they're normally fall sports. So right now they have to play and try to maintain eligibility for now, but also for next year. So that's what we're dealing with, and this is where we come up with the recommendation. So I thank you for your time. Thanks.
Thank you. I think there may be some questions and discussion. Oh, okay,
I have a question. I'm definitely impressed with what North Forsyth has achieved, but also noted that those were the best results if you look at the list of all the schools. So I'm wondering if what they did was an anomaly, or was it a central office directive to do that with students? Because clearly the other schools didn't have the same results.
It was not a directive.
Okay. So this was something North Forsyth did on their own?
This is something North Forsyth does all the time.
Okay.
And this is a standard number for them. Their
Yeah.
numbers didn't change very much at all to a typical year.
Right, but it looks like the other schools' numbers doubled or tripled from
Yes.
what they usually have. Okay.
Yes.
I'm hoping that maybe from the district level, we could use North Forsyth as a model, obviously moving forward. And thank you for what you're doing for your students, and they are students first, and athletes, second. And I know that seems like you have a great working relationship within your school, with your administrators, your coaching staff, and your teachers. And so, I would hope, I don't think that we're going to immediately walk away from some of the COVID challenges, even going into next year. And so what can we do to support them in that way? And if schools aren't able to make these types of results on their own, then I think we need to help them, give them support.
Yes.
I want to compliment all of you. What you did is you gave these kids a different perspective of life. Through hard work, they can achieve and they can get ahead. I also have to say, some of these kids just plain are having a hard time with this virtual stuff. Some of them need hands-on. Some of these kids are people to be involved in their life, and that's what you did. And that's these three heroes standing up here right now. I respect what you've done, and I do not want to see a kid have to sit out for lack of having the supervision that we normally have in our schools. So that's where I stand, and what we can do to make it happen, if we have to bring kids in on Saturdays, or what we have to do. There has to be other ways that these kids can bring up their grades rather than to sit out a sport that they want and they are trying hard to be able to do. This is not necessarily, folks, just the kids' fault. This is a lot of people's fault. A lot of people that haven't been able to do things for their kids. And that's where a lot of this, I think, is coming from. This virtual stuff is hard to older people. It's hard for a grandmother. I'm a grandmother. It's hard for a grandmother to sit down and all at once know how to punch this in and punch that in, and then not be able to say to someone, hey, I'm lost. What do I do next? Because it just carries on, just carries on. So I just want to say whatever we can do to help these kids, we need to do it. And again, I want to compliment three heroes that are standing up here. Thank you.
Can you elaborate a little bit on local units may be more restrictive but not less restrictive?
Yes, so, for example, you could have, to be eligible within the state guidelines, you could have 4 Ds and you're eligible to participate. But in our county, you would not be, because that does not equate to a 2.0. So that's how so we're allowed to apply the 2.0, which makes it a little harder for kids to, or, the C average.
Okay, thank you. I think that's what a lot of people don't understand.
Sure.
Is that in our district, we are more restrictive than the rest of the state on what they are, what the guidelines that they are under. And that was put in place years ago for exactly what people at North Forsyth are doing. Is that that the board at that time wanted our athletes to have a concentration on academics as well as athletics. And so therefore, that the 2.0 was put into place, which was more restrictive than the state. And at that time, much more restrictive. I think the state up there is after that a little bit, if I remember correctly. But for exactly the reason, and the board at that time allocated money for tutoring for students who needed that help, athletes who needed that help. And I also want to say that that's not only athletes. That policy is in place for all extracurriculars. So that encompasses ROTC, it encompasses theater, it encompasses marching band, lots of things. So, so I just wanted to make that very clear. I think people would need to understand that exactly what North Forsyth, and they're doing an awesome job. I want to compliment you all very much on that. But that's why we have a more restrictive policy than the state has, so that we can give these folks, these students that need help, even not during COVID. And to Lida's point, they definitely need help during COVID, but at all times. So I just want to make sure that the public understands that we have been more restrictive, and that so that our athletes are not on the same playing field, so to speak, with other counties at this time. So for us to become least restrictive just puts us back in compliance with what the state actually does, because we have been more restrictive.
Just a couple questions. I think this may be a question for Madam Superintendent. So relative to the concern about the additional screen time, is there a way, or, would you consider kind of giving some thought to how we can get some of the students in the classroom as opposed to having to kind of get that done, just kind of longer term, kind of down the road? And then the other question is the GPA, the 2.0 currently, is that cumulative or is that the semester GPA?
Tricia, I'll go. So the first part, as far as the screen time goes, the tutors aren't necessarily always coaches, so I think the struggle is going to be finding teachers who have typically, in the past, been the school tutors to meet face-to-face with another group, right, which then, puts them at risk. And so that's one of the reasons I think it's remained virtual. They are given the option to go face-to-face if they can, but sometimes the groups get so large, the tutors don't want to be in front of that larger group and exposed any further. And then the second question, I'm sorry, can you?
It's just whether or not our district requirement is a cumulative GPA, or is it the semester from the semester prior?
It's the current semester. It's not a cumulative, yes. Okay. So it's the previous semester which determines your eligibility.
Okay, thank you.
Just to add one more thing, if you don't mind, to John's statement. So each of our schools submitted a plan last week, an extended learning plan, and that's to address any students at this point that are below level, not proficient in specific content area. And so each school now has submitted a plan. Our area superintendents and our deputy superintendent, Dr. Pratt, are reviewing those plans. And that will be to provide the tutorial services needed. And every school is addressing it in different ways. It might be after-school tutorials, Saturday academies. And so we'll get you more information at the next meeting about what some of that's going to look like.
Thank you.
I just have a couple of questions for clarification to make sure that I'm clear about the recommendation. So the recommendation is just to waive the 2.0 GPA for the second semester. So this concession would expire fall of 2021.
That is correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Then the other question I have, just to be clear, you said that in the fall, all students were eligible by way of the state, but the state just did not extend it to second semester.
That is correct also.
Okay, so then.
And the students didn't know until October, so they were already a month and a half into the year before they knew it was going to be a different standard.
Okay, thank you for that.
Yeah.
I had one more question, and it's not directly related to this, but how, in your opinion, has the pandemic affected football recruitment for college, for students? Because I think one of the concerns I've heard about why this is important is because there are effects on potential students' eligibility. Like if they're a senior and they want to play in the fall, that, this could hurt their chances of playing in the fall if they're a senior and they want to play at school. So could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, it potentially hurts the athlete that hadn't had an offer yet.
Yeah.
I don't believe coaches were going to, typically they don't pull offers for grades unless it puts them into a different category and they can't get them into the school. So yes, it does have some effect, but it's typically the kids that had not received an offer yet and we're still hoping to go to a smaller school and continue and play. So yes, there is some effect there as well.
That's a good point. Are there any further questions or discussion for these gentlemen? Thank you so much. We appreciate you.
Thank you.
The next discussion item is the revised resolution regarding the stormwater maintenance at Paisley Lawrence Middle School. Darrell Walker will lead us in discussion, who is our actual assistant superintendent. I think Mr. Moore is not here this evening.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Ms. McManus and Board. I'd also like to take, if you don't mind, just a second to thank Brent Campbell and his staff for that video. I think our bus drivers really will appreciate the opportunity to be recognized. It's been we've been doing some Zoom calls with those folks, and it's just amazing the difference in the attitudes just around just connection and communication with folks. So thank you, Brent, to you and your staff for doing that, and also like to take the opportunity to thank Sean and John. If you go to any of our high schools right now, there's about 8, 9 different sports going on at one time. So there's a lot of activity taking place on our campuses. So thank them for that work. Tonight, this item before you is just really a little bit of housekeeping. With the City of Winston-Salem requires Madam Chair and our interim superintendent to sign a document that says that when you have a stormwater pond, a new stormwater pond like we have at Paisley Lawrence, the requirement and ordinance is we have to set aside 4% of the cost of the stormwater pond for maintenance fees, ongoing fees. And that's basically just some housekeeping issues that we have to deal with. Just so you know what that is in dollars, it's about $8,000 that it would cost us a year to maintain the stormwater ponds. So when you say 4%, what does that equate to money? It's about $8,000. It's about $200,000 to build a stormwater pond. So those costs go towards plant material, general maintenance, and treating water quality versus quantity, these stormwater ponds. So just a little bit of housekeeping that we need to go through. I entertain any questions if there are any.
It doesn't appear to be so, Mr. Walker. I think you can go to the next discussion item, which is complete the bipolar ionization installations in all Winston-Salem Forsyth County school facilities.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. As you can see in the documents, we have about 57 schools completed. We are hoping to wrap these up. Hopefully, I'm hoping we finish these over spring break. And if not, shortly after that. We need some additional funds, and Andrea's group has worked with us for the state CRF funds of the equivalent of about $628,593. That will complete the process for all schools and all buildings, not just schools, but the admin building, maintenance, transportation, child nutrition, serves all of our facilities. So hopefully here sooner than later, over the next couple of months, we'll be completely finished with all of our facilities. Yes, ma'am.
A teacher had sent an email about Brunson, worried that possibly it wasn't going to be installed there since we are looking to build a new school. Will it also be?
It will.
At Brunson? Okay, great.
Yeah, we can just take those units with us when we go.
Great.
Yes, ma'am. Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, Darrell, excuse me.
I'm sorry,
This is Elizabeth.
Yes, ma'am.
I'd just like you to once again review for the public the advantage of doing this project and why it's so good for our district?
Yeah, without getting too scientific about it, it basically purifies the air. So when air comes into your classroom or into the building, it circulates back out. And then when it comes back through the filtration system, it's pure air. So captures, there's these negative and positive ions that are created, kind of kills any pathogens in the air. Again, I wanted to reemphasize while I have this opportunity, this is not about COVID. This is something we've been looking to do for purification for our classrooms for years. We have a lot of absenteeism in the spring with allergies and things that this should, I'm really hoping that next year I can come back to you with some really good documentation to show how this science is really going to be good for the overall good of our staff.
Thank you so much. I really wanted people to hear that this is helpful during COVID, but the real value is long-term. So
Yes, ma'am.
thank you
And also,
for your leadership.
Thank you. There are some folks that would say we could, we're fogging our buildings on Wednesdays. With this process, we really don't have to do that anymore, but we're not going to stop that process. I just want people to know we're going to continue both processes along the way as we continue to go through the COVID process.
Thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am. Any other questions?
Thank you, Darryl.
Thank you.
Next, we will have the annual equity plan update by our Executive Director of Equity Access and Acceleration. Say that very fast, and it's a tongue twister, by Miss Effie McMillan. And I would just like to preface by saying that according to our equity plan, we should have a yearly update. And so we're kind of a few months beyond that, but we are getting the update tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Woodbury. Good evening, Ms. McManus, other board members. So this is a pretty lengthy report, as you have seen. So there's a lot of information to share, and I'm just going to walk through it as clearly as possible, making sure I hit all my talking points, and then I'll try to answer any questions at the end. Oh, I can hit it? Okay, perfect. All right, so where I wanted to start out with, this is what I really expressed to the State Board of Education back in October. I had the pleasure of presenting during their annual fall retreat, the work that we're doing here in Winston-Salem, Forsyth County Schools. And just letting them know that we have set forth a really bold strategic plan that has equity embedded throughout. Sorry, I get to breathe on funny with this mask on. It's my asthma that plays with me, so I apologize for that.
No worries.
But, you know, when we speak of equity in action, we really have to think about it as action, and it's not a buzzword. And sometimes it can come across as that. So it's with these bold goals that I believe we will set a path to close opportunity gaps and advance educational equity. So while this is for information purposes to update you on the current work that is happening out of the Equity and Accountability Office, that is aligned to Goal 2. That's really important to keep in mind. So it doesn't cover every aspect of equity across the district, but it aligns to Goal 2. So here's my proposal. I know Chair Woodbury had mentioned, that an annual equity report should be brought forth once a year. My proposal, though, is that we can have a more robust equity report if we go back and revise Policy 2112, which is the superintendent's report. It was last updated in 2003. It was enacted in 1969, though. And so with that policy, with it being not updated since 2003, it really came into play where equity was a part of that report. When the equity committee that was, had to take it down for a second. When the equity committee that was in existence from 1995 to about 2004 was in existence. When that committee was disbanded, the equity report was added to the superintendent's report. I don't know if we've been given annual reports, but my suggestion is that we look at policy 2112 and make revisions to it so that we can have a robust equity report included that gives a comprehensive picture of where we are, our work, and our next steps. So, on these next few slides, what you will see are the goals that we set forth for the next 5 years. That covers every single goal. But just keep in mind that I'm only going to focus on goal 2 tonight. So I'm not going to read each of these goals, but goal 1, just remember that it's focused on student achievement. Goal 2 is specific to equity and access. Goal 3 is specific to community engagement. Goal 4 is specific to human resources and development. And goal 5 is specific to climate and safety. Okay? So I also want to just redirect your attention to when Equity Policy 1100 was passed January 2020, a part of that policy included these 5 pillars that impact student achievement and further the board's and the district's commitment to equity in all aspects of education and to promote the social, emotional, and physical well-being of every student. So, as you know, and I've heard with the previous presentation, is that we were all tremendously impacted by COVID-19. So inequities existed prior to COVID-19 as a result of long-standing policies and practices, and this pandemic only exacerbated those, causing school districts just like ours to re-examine itself, its practices, its policies, and to problem solve and seek solutions in ways that districts have never done before. So it really ushered in a new way of being for school districts and gave us pause to reflect on and think about how we mitigate what would become our new norm for teaching and learning. And so the work that started last year was, I would say, intensely focused on COVID-19. You know, it wasn't our choice to shut down schools, so we had a lot of things we had to do and put in place. And fortunately, we're starting to move kids back into schools. But what was important was for us to leverage all avenues to ensure that every student had access to equipment, opportunities, basic needs, and environment and the support systems to success. Some students had more opportunities, while other students had greater challenges that just compounded the challenges that they already had in existence. So these were many of our responses to COVID-19. What I do want to just speak to just briefly is how our CARES team was really a game changer. When I presented to the board in October, no other district across the state of North Carolina had even conceived the concept of a community-based CARES team or a school-based CARES team. And so it really, with the people that we hired, and there was a lot of intentionality around that as well, these were people that were already connected to the community. They knew the community well, they had connections to resources, and if I say so myself, some of them are watching tonight, is that they are a phenomenal team to work with, and they really care about the children in our district, because I have seen them and talked to them about the lengths at which they go to support our families, even well beyond regular work hours. So that CARES team, again, game changer. I just want to share one brief story with you about one of our community CARES team liaisons' experience. This is just one out of many that I could share. But there was a parent, she's a single mother, she has 4 children, and for about 3 months, she has been living with her sister, who had 3 children, on her own in a 2-bedroom apartment, just, you know, many things that were a challenge, which even impacted her children's ability to log in on Zoom, access their classes, and stay engaged. And the initial work of the CARES team was really about engagement, and they've really shifted a lot of that. But just here is some of the power of the stuff that they've done. So I won't tell the whole story of this mother, but when our CARES team, our community-based team, got involved with this family, they were able to connect her to a community partner called Experiment in Self-Reliance. She was able to enroll in a self-sufficiency program, which has helped her obtain her own job and home, and has helped her to transfer her children to another elementary school. And they're now logging in regularly, and their academics have improved. So their work has gone more than just engagement, but helping with housing, food, many things that goes beyond the call of duty to support our families. My hat goes off to them because they have been lifesavers and lifelines for many of our families.
How many CARES workers do we have? How many is on that staff?
So we have 5 community liaisons. We have 2 parent assistants. They are bilingual. We have 2 tech assistants on that team. And we have the district-based CARES lead who helps to oversee and help dispatch them to families that need support. So it's about a team of 10.
And does every school have their very own CARES person at every school?
Every school has a team of 5.
Okay.
They are the first line of defense is how I would describe it, to intervene for students. But when they don't get the results after multiple attempts, then it's escalated to the community-based team. And so it really has become a hand-in-hand partnership between our community team and our school-based team because they are working together to help make a difference.
And as we had mentioned before, this hopefully can continue after COVID.
Yes, that is
because
definitely the hope.
It's just a great
Yes,
plan.
absolutely, absolutely, the hope that this can continue.
One more, I'm sorry,
No,
one more
no,
thing.
fine, you're
And
fine.
how does the CARES team at the school level, and I guess also the community CARES team, how do they also interact with our social workers that I know are, they support our students as well? And how does that, are there certain things that CARES, I guess our CARES team, it's kind of in their wheelhouse to handle, and other things then refer to our social workers?
So it's really an extension, and for most of the school-based CARES teams, the social workers are on the team, and so they intervene first, and it's really like an extension to the work that the social workers do. It does not take the place of what they do, nor is it it's not a substitute, I guess I should say. It's not a substitute, but it's really an add-on. There are times that maybe a social worker can't make the connection or support the family in the way that the community-based CARES team has the ability or the connections to be able to do. And so it's just really an extension. And again, I think the big thing is that it takes all of us. And so the school-based teams and those community-based teams are truly making a difference. So next, I want to just talk briefly about the Equity Advisory. Excuse me. We had our first meeting on January 14th. During this meeting, we reviewed the bylaws and established norms, reviewed the strategic plan. We engaged in an impact and feasibility activity to highlight the work that we are aiming to do, but also to bring understanding that equity work is a marathon and not a sprint, and that doesn't always yield immediate results, but it is ongoing and concluded. It's ongoing, and we conclude it with next steps. So our next meeting is scheduled for March 10th. During that meeting, we're going to engage in a discussion activity around system change, and we're going to engage in a discussion feedback for AIG pathways and our LIFT program.
Ms. McMillan, what
Yes.
time is that equity advisory meeting on March 10th?
So on March 10th is from 11 to 1.
Okay, thank you.
Based on feedback from committee members, there was the majority could meet during that time. However, we had about 5 or 6 that need an evening time, so I'm working to try to also accommodate and have a second meeting for those who missed so that they can engage as well. Those sessions are recorded and they are posted on the equity website, departmental website. At the last board meeting, you heard from Dr. Stefan Lallinger with the Bridges Collaborative. Most recently, we engaged in 3 sessions, which included detracking and expanding access to advanced courses to historically underrepresented communities, improving enrollment mechanisms for selective and magnet schools, and communicating effectively about the importance of diversity in these schools. We also participated in a session on enrollment mechanisms that lead to integration, tweaking, or reforming student assignment in districts. And other partners were also a part of that collaborative. The team from the district that is in this partnership, the Bridges Collaborative, includes Chair Woodbury, Ms. McManus, Andy Kraft, Homan Jabbar, and myself. For the next convening, which will be near the end of March, going into April, Board Member Crowley and one of our students will be represented on the team. All right, so we're going to get into access and opportunity, which is aligned to Goal 2. So just keep in mind that the end of the 2019-2020 school year has definitely been different than anything we've ever experienced. And our response to COVID-19 was overwhelming and was definitely where our work was really focused on for quite some time. However, in the Equity and Accountability Office, what was important to us was that we didn't want to get until the end of the school year and say, we haven't accomplished anything because of COVID. So we began continuing with the work we were doing and really focusing on our 5-year strategic plan. So for what I'm going to share with you, all the work hasn't started, so I'm just going to tell you what we're currently working on, what our next steps are, and data that shows impact is also not available at this time. So when we think about advanced learning, our advanced learning department is working to increase awareness of all the opportunities that are available to our students. We're also working specifically to target students from underrepresented groups. As mentioned earlier, the AIG plan is going to be brought to the Equity Advisory for feedback on the multiple pathways that we can write into that plan that will give greater access to underrepresented groups, student groups. High school principals and counselors have also been challenged during this registration period, to identify and mentor at least 5 students who are typically not interested or have typically not participated in to enroll in AP and or CCP courses. To support principals and counselors, our advanced learning team developed student profiles using guidance or guidelines from Equal Opportunity Schools, which we had a report from them that really gave us a description of a student who would typically be overlooked and how we need to use those guidelines to help us identify students who are typically not encouraged, not recruited, not supported to take AP or CCP courses. With that will be support to students too who enroll, especially those who are new to those courses. At the last principals meeting, AVID was introduced to middle schools. If we are going to prepare students for those higher level courses in high school, we've got to start early. So we are looking at implementing AVID in middle schools, and I know Nicolette Grant and her team have shared that with her before.
What is AVID and is CCP Career Center?
It's
program?
College and Career Promise.
Oh, college, okay. What is AVID?
So AVID is it's really a system that supports teachers with professional development, helping to eliminate barriers for students, particularly students who are typically not identified or recognized to be in advanced level courses. It helps to give them the tools and skills to be able to navigate those courses that sets them up for true lifelong success. And we're happy to send additional information if needed. Also, to expand our opportunities, we are in collaboration with the North Carolina School of Science and Math. We have not had a partnership with them in quite some time, but we've been in partnership with them or collaborating with them around their STEM Scholars Program, which is designed specifically to recruit underrepresented minority student groups in STEM career fields. AP Summer Bridge will continue as usual, and then our AL team is also being very intentional about hosting parent sessions. We really feel like it's important for us to equip parents with the information and knowledge that they need in order to make the best decisions for their child or children. So as I mentioned before, we're going to be finalizing AIG plans to submit to DPI. Professional development here are some of our next steps. Professional development for counselors, AP teachers, around implicit bias, differentiated instruction, instructional strategies to meet the needs of diverse learners. We'll be continue to monitor data, to audit course enrollment by race and gender. And I mentioned the support plan that we will be doing for staff and students for these AP courses. CTE is another area that falls under Goal 2. So there's been a group who's been working on updated or revised MOU with Forsyth Tech. That is something that hadn't taken place in a few years as well, but it really supports the work of our middle college, early college, college and career promise courses. And the CTE team, Bruce Sherman and Vicki Willer, are planning to bring that information to the board in March to provide more information. It truly is a huge win with the partnership, especially since Forsyth Tech will be waiving tuition and fees for students up to 8 hours in CCP courses. So this will allow for access for students, especially our students whose families face economic challenges. There still will be a need, though, because the textbooks are not included in the cost. And so that is a fee that we have to think about how we offset that for families. In addition to the work for CTE, they started PLTs in January with the goal of really improving their instruction, aligning credentials, performance-based measures, and assessments for student success, with the goal of evolving these to analyze and address student enrollment data by race and gender to better establish marketing and recruiting strategies for non-traditional student participation and pathway completion. Next, under Goal 2, we're also addressing disproportionality. So, a steering committee has been established to move forward the work aligned with discipline disproportionality. Excuse me. The steering committee has started meeting to discuss a timeline for analyzing discipline data for students and students with disabilities, planning for stakeholder engagement sessions, and reviewing our current code of conduct. We've also been working to identify policies related to student discipline to review and revise as needed. Part of this work has also included reaching out to other urban districts to understand the process they underwent for their code of conduct to reduce disproportionality and to improve the culture climate of our district and schools, which also aligns to Goal 5. So we have finished our data analysis, and we're beginning to dig through and talk through what the data is showing us. In addition to the steering committee's work, the district has partnered with Triad Restorative Justice, and they have worked with Reagan and Carver High School, as well as SROs to provide training for restorative practices. In addition to that, the district has about 10 licensed trainers through the International Institute for Restorative Practices, and we are working now to develop a strategic training and coaching rollout plan for the 21-22 school year. All right, I'm going to talk about disproportionality in EC. As a result of being identified as having significant disproportionality for EC identification, more specifically in the category of serious emotional disabilities, the state required federal funding be set aside to address our district's needs. So, because this is a complex issue, the state is offering professional development through a project called Arise NC. There are several people within the district that are participating in this project, and we're working with them to identify and implement solutions, and having a chance to collaborate with other districts. In addition to that work, Mary Todd Allen, who leads our EC department, has been able to create positions of behavior coaches to support schools and teachers with implementing behavioral implementation plans for both regular education students, pre-referrals, and for students already identified. She and her team has reviewed all students who were identified SED to determine if the team considered all possible explanations before the identification to make sure that if an identification is warranted, that it is the correct identification. She and her team also are not waiting for the 3-year evaluation process. So they've already started reevaluating students to see if there are needs for changes in their IEP or category. She's exploring the role of implicit bias in the identification of African American males in the category of SED, and SED stands for serious emotional disabilities, just in case someone's not familiar with that acronym. And then she's also tracking initial referrals to determine if the teams are also considering other reasons for children's behavioral concerns. So helping to eliminate us jumping the gun to a specific identification without having all the evidence that's needed to get there. Or making sure that...
Is that a medical diagnosis, SED? So who?
That's an exceptional children's identification.
So who can determine that that is an appropriate label to put on a child?
So I'd have to have Mary answer that specifically.
Okay. I was just curious because it sounds like something that you would need a psychiatrist or a psychologist to.
So what would
identify.
happen, and maybe Ms. McManus is going to go through it. I'm not an EC expert, but there are evaluations that kids would go through that is done through the school, and psych services that are evaluations that can help lead to that.
Yes, and also, you don't just go to a category like that. You have to put in many interventions through your MTSS process, behavioral interventions at several tiers before you would even take it to next steps.
And so part of Mary's process is to make sure that we're going through all those steps and not just going from step A to step D identification without taking the necessary steps. I see Mary's coming in here to help me out. Did you want to add something, Mary?
So in North Carolina, identification in that category is based on North Carolina criteria. And that criteria across the country is very subjective for this particular category. So it's easy for people to fall into a pattern of identifying children without exploring. You know, there's no IQ cutoff, there's no checklist in particular. It's very difficult to tease out what might be an emotional disability. And really it centers around a child having unusual reactions under normal circumstances. well, what's normal? What's an unusual? And it's very difficult to tease out. So we want to teach our teachers to take their time and to make sure that we're not looking at trauma, we're not looking at the effects of depression or ADHD or autism, and we're calling it something else. That's our concern.
Thank you so much. Mary, I'm glad you heard me. In need of help.
Ms. McMillan, I'm sorry.
Yes.
While we're on that slide, I wanted to ask, is the work of the steering committee plugged into the school justice partnership? Are you familiar with the school justice partnership?
We are.
Okay.
The school, that's how we began to roll out restorative practices at Reagan and Carver. We have not brought them into this process yet. Right now, we're just trying to get our arms around what the data is telling us.
Yep.
And that's been pretty extensive work to just pull everything to know what the incidences are, OSS, ISS, where it's happening most, all those kinds of things. So we've been trying to wrap our arms around that. And what was important for us, so sometimes I get overly ambitious and I'm like, okay, this is a need. I think we can do it in 2 or 3 months. When I really know it takes longer than that to really go through the work on the front end so we have successful implementation. So we have reached out to multiple urban districts who have gone through this process recently and talked about what was their process. Like, we wanted to make sure that we weren't missing things. Like, we could have a realistic timeline, make sure no stones were uncovered, and then know how we needed to bring stakeholders together, not just within the district, but our community as well and families, so that we really have a code of conduct, a discipline code of conduct that can really set us on a path to reducing the disproportionality that we see. But thank you for that reminder. And I'll just put that in my notes. The last piece that I really want to talk about is around MWBE participation. This also falls under Goal 2. Colin Moore has really been instrumental in leading this work to increase our MWBE participation. So we currently meet the threshold of the 10%. However, upon deeper analysis, the representation of black-owned contractors is where we have a disproportionate participation. So Colin has been working with Greensboro staffing to develop a minority contractor development program. Has multiple steps in there that Colin definitely could share with you. I can just highlight just a few of them. But part of it includes a mentoring process. And even if that black-owned business does not have like a ton of staff and can meet the capacity of large projects, other projects as entry points, and making sure that we're doing our due diligence to be transparent with what the bidding process is. And so already, Colin has worked with Maximum Enterprise and the Trade Partner Outreach event to host 2 information sessions that focus specifically on getting information to minority contractors. So that was a lunch and learn sessions.
Ms. McMillan, I'm sorry. So, and
that's fine.
this might be a question for Mr. Walker, because I think Colin's not here, but so currently the MWBE goals are combined. It's a combined M and W. It's just like a whole 10%. It's not separated. And the reason why I ask is because I think that there may be some virtue in separating those, or just thinking about the possibility of separating those goals, because I think what then you have is the requirement of contractors is that they have to meet the M goal and the W goal, and so then they make some extra efforts to try to find the subcontractors, which can supplement our efforts to try to get some M firms involved, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
The current state policy is 10%. Our policy just matches the state policy. But our actual participation's been running much higher. Probably in this bond referendum, we're up close to 30% in this bond referendum. But it's not categorized, as you mentioned.
Right.
So,
Okay. Thank you.
yes, sir.
Thank you. So next I want to talk about professional learning. So I've presented a lot, but it only scratches the surface of the work that is happening in the district, because of course this only fell under goal 2. But given our disproportionate data and persistent opportunity gaps and requests from various district leaders and school leaders to delve deeper into understanding racial equity, beginning in March, which is next week, March 3rd, JPMT will participate in the groundwater presentation by the Racial Equity Institute. This training will serve as a launching pad into further courageous conversations, which will continue with a 17-week comprehensive racial equity learning program facilitated by Dr. Tracy Benson. For the initial rollout for this racial equity learning program, 3 cohorts will participate, with each cohort consisting of 12 people. The first cohort will be with senior district leadership, and the 2 consecutive cohorts will consist of school leadership. At the conclusion of the 3rd cohort, it will be a total of 36 leaders who will have participated. Final details are forthcoming to principals in their weekly newsletter, and at that time, they will have the opportunity to volunteer and sign up to participate. So we're opening up the door first to those who are interested. This learning opportunity would not be possible without the financial support of the Winston-Salem Foundation, in which they awarded the district approximately $150,000. The foundation considers this investment as part of our work in the focus area of advancing equity in education. In addition to the 2 trainings that I just mentioned, we are offering lunch and learn sessions. Requests made by school leaders was on topics such as anti-racist teaching, creating a positive school culture in a chaotic world, restorative practices, social justice in educating, cultivating positive school cultures and climates, culturally relevant teaching, and how to engage in crucial conversations. Based on their request, I will be facilitating 6 sessions related to many of these topics. Last but not least, just as I close, on this journey to achieve equity, as I said before, it's a marathon, not a sprint, and it's definitely not a buzzword. So as we continue on this journey as a district to advance equity and improve outcomes for all of our students, here are just a few parting thoughts. These are things that I believe in. My colleagues have shown proof that they believe in these as well, and I would just like to lift them up as parting thoughts. If we create policies and practices that eliminate barriers and foster growth mindset that counters the belief that perpetuates factors of achievement predictability, students will have equitable access to learning opportunities. Zip code should not determine student success. If we provide high-quality professional learning opportunities for all staff and support application of culturally responsive instructional strategies and accelerated learning opportunities, then every single student that we serve will have equitable access to high-quality teaching and learning. If we invest in recruiting and retaining a diverse and high-quality staff at all levels that is equity-driven, we will close gaps, raise student achievement and efficacy, and prepare all our students for college or career. If we foster courageous conversations and support school leaders and teachers and establish district, school, community, and family partnerships, then every student will have equitable access to a safe and inclusive learning environment. And last but not least is one of the things that I hold near and dear to my heart is about empowerment. If we provide students with enriching opportunities and utilize restorative and culturally responsive practices, then every student will have equitable access to learning opportunities and will be empowered to excel to their fullest potential. So with that, are there any additional questions?
I don't have any questions, but I would like to thank Board Member Kaplan because, you know, her initial leadership with the equity community team and working with Effie McMillan to jumpstart this, and I know her continuous, you know, leadership with this group is a real game changer that I think this board will, you know, have a lasting effect with other, you know, systems in our community to help our community to move very progressively. So I really wanted to thank Board Member Kaplan for her leadership in this. Thank you.
I do have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
That I emailed you about earlier.
Yes.
This plan is so extensive and it's impressive. And the only thing that, and I know you addressed facilities a little bit with the MWBE part, but I'm looking at how facilities impact students and staff, and was just wondering what the plan is to include that in this, in the, you know, in the future of the equity focus.
I know that there's a facilities advisory that has been established, and they are meeting, I want to say tomorrow, where they're going to continue this conversation. And a part of the work from that will bring suggestions, feedback to the board about facilities.
I just know that it's, you know, it definitely impacts our students and staff, and with, you know, over the years, how most of the newer schools have gone into the suburban areas, that, you know, there's only so much money to go around, and some of the more centralized schools that tend to be higher minority populations haven't been renovated or expanded or, you know, that type of thing, and just, and I'm also concerned from the aspect of a lot of the older schools that have not been brought up to ADA guidelines or Title IX guidelines, and that's included when we look at things through this equity lens.
Ms. McManus, do you want to add anything in terms of facilities?
No, we definitely, I mean, we've been meeting about this exact topic. Tomorrow, the Facilities Advisory, I will be discussing this. And I don't know if Daryl or Colin, we'll get you more information about facilities. It's definitely a priority that we are not only repairing things in order. If you have an air conditioning system that needs to be repaired, that needs to be repaired. But then if there are other facilities issues, we definitely need to be prioritizing based on an equity-driven formula, just like with many of our other resourcing.
Any additional questions? I see Daryl's walked up.
You don't mind if I jump in? We are meeting tomorrow night, and then part of the agenda items tomorrow night are to look at what our current standards are in all of our schools. And do we want to continue with those standards or change some things within the standards? It also includes athletics tomorrow night in the part of that discussion on that agenda. So it'll be a pretty rich conversation probably tomorrow night, where we'll have some good information to bring back.
Is there a plan to procure a facilities assessment, kind of like what Guilford County schools did?
We've talked about that in the past, and quite honestly, I feel like we have really good data in our work order system to evaluate that. And this is not going to be nice to say, but I've struggled having to spend probably about $500,000 to do an assessment when we kind of really have good information. If I felt like we didn't and our buildings were in really disarray, I would not agree, but I think we're in really good shape. I do think that we have some, you know, there's some strategy around why schools were built where they were back in the 06 bond, because we just had a lot of growth in certain areas. We had a real focus on neighborhood schools. So, you know, there's some reasons behind that. It doesn't solve the problem. It just means that we have to kind of regroup a little bit and look at the big picture. But I mean, I think if this board so desires to want to do that, we surely can make that happen. The county did that about 2 years ago on their facilities. They use the same group that we do our work order system with currently, so it can be done.
Okay, any other questions from the board?
Just one. So
Yes.
I wanted to ask, because you mentioned at the beginning of your presentation, of course, that what you covered was kind of limited, but I would be interested to sort of understand where we are relative to equity in recruitment and retention of not just teachers, but in kind of all our positions where that's sort of needed. Because I think that's also an important piece as well. And I know that you may not directly do that, but I would be interested to get some information about that.
Absolutely. I will touch base with our Chief Human Resources Officer so she can provide some additional information for you. I will just add at this point in time, part of our Bridges Collaborative, the application we submitted and the work that we've already started with them, is that we had to identify some measurable goals through the partnership, and one of our measurable goals was to increase underrepresented employees that mirror the demographics of our district was one. One was to increase African American, Hispanic, and Asian principal demographics to reflect the district's demographics. And then the other one is not related to HR, but it was all about the decrease in disproportionality for enrollment of underrepresented student groups in AP CCP courses.
When Effie and I were speaking about this, I asked the same thing. I said, what about, we have HR, we do have specific goals around HR and specific practices around recruitment. And so we decided, let's bring this back in pieces with the different, equity is a through line with everything we do. And that's what I love about this. So what Effie spoke to tonight was specific around goal 2, but we need to speak about each of those other goal areas and some of the other practices. So I think we schedule follow-up meetings to this where you can hear about progress with equity around HR, facilities, resourcing and finances, and other areas as well.
Any other questions?
Thank you, Ms. McMillan.
Thank you so much. Have a good evening.
You too. Next, we will have a COVID-19 update and recommendation by our interim superintendent, Ms. McManus. As she prepared to speak, I just wanted to share with the public a letter that was received on behalf of our Forsyth County delegation out of the office of Representative Donnie Lambeth. Just for FYI, the representatives on the Forsyth County delegation are Amber Baker, Donnie Lambeth, of course, Evelyn Terry, Lee Zachary, Jeff Zinger. Then our senators are George Quarrick and Paul Lowe. And the letter reads, February the 4th, the school board sent a letter to the governor and our Forsyth County delegation around the prioritization of teachers or all educators for vaccination. And so Representative Lambeth replied back on behalf of the delegation, thank you for your letter. Members of the Forsyth delegation are also very concerned regarding the current distribution of vaccines and are working to ensure that our guidelines and safety measures that protect our teachers, staff, and students are followed. I have personally challenged the Secretary of North Carolina, DHHS, to move teachers up in priority for vaccinations. As you may know, HHS, along with Governor Cooper, is responsible for setting guidelines for vaccine distribution. Currently, North Carolina is following the federal CDC guidelines. In addition, North Carolina has not received enough doses of the vaccine to vaccinate each of its citizens who desire to receive a shot. The Secretary is working with the federal officials, and we believe North Carolina will begin to receive more doses over the next few weeks. Of course, this letter was sent on February the 10th. A bit of good news, both the Secretary and Governor Cooper have indicated that teachers are in the next category to begin receiving the vaccine. I ask you to be patient with the Secretary, but to also encourage your staff members to get the vaccine as soon as it is made available to them. This is a deadly virus, and each of us need to do his or her part in receiving the vaccine when it becomes available. I am unable to provide you an exact date when the vaccine will become available, but I can tell you that legislators are aware and supportive of teachers and staff receiving the shot as soon as possible. Thank you for your inquiry. I hope this letter provides a better understanding regarding the allocation of doses by the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services, and that priority is based currently on CDC guidelines. Sincerely, Donnie Lambert. Thank you for allowing me to share that. Ms. McManus.
Thank you. And he was right, because the vaccines have started coming in more quantity, so we're very excited, and we appreciate Representative Lambert's support. So as I begin the update I'm going to provide this evening, just want to thank everyone, our school staffs, our bus drivers, everyone in the staff, teachers and cafeteria workers, central office, everyone that has supported our return plan. I will tell you, our folks are doing a great job. If you've been in schools, you can see that, and we appreciate them, not only with the safety protocols, but how they're navigating between remote learners, in-person learners, and so thank you very much to our staff for their efforts. So really quickly, this is broken into 3 segments, and we did that intentionally so that I could go through slides, and then you could ask questions, then I'll go through slides, and so we'll do it in 3 segments. First of all, this is the number of students that have been back in person. As you can tell, elementary has had the greatest return at this time. High school is expected. It is not current. We've only had 9th grade, 4 cohorts return so far, and then yesterday was our 10th, 11th, and 12th grade, the cohort 1, the first cohort. Today we took SAT for 11th graders, so tomorrow students will be back again in high school. Here is some information. One of the things I would like to start doing is providing our board an update every 2 weeks with some very specific data. And we're at a point now in cooperation with ABC Collaborative that we are able to kind of isolate this data. This is from February 1st to February 21st. And it just basically shows you our number of confirmed cases. These are reported confirmed cases. That means someone has called or told their COVID coordinator that they have COVID. And so it shows you students and staff. Total number of close contacts related to an exposure. That number is based on someone has reported a confirmed case. Were they at school within 48 hours prior to knowing they were a positive case? And if so, do they have any close contacts? So that's where the 149 comes in. And then the percentage of reported secondary transmission, it's about 0.67%. And ABC Collaborative says 1% and under is a successful implementation at a school site. So I will tell you, our school staffs are doing amazing work following mitigation strategies. Forsyth County data, we haven't shared this in a while, and so we went and got this information from the state website, but I thought it might be important for us to know that our community as a whole is obviously doing much better with following mitigation strategies. Maybe it's because we are having vaccines that have started, but we are now actually at a significant yellow versus a critical red, which we were at in January, if you remember. There have been 169 clusters in schools and since May 2020, and we have had 1 here, and that was in November. And remember, a cluster has to be epi-linked, and the health department has determined that a school is a cluster based on the contact tracing and case investigation. And you can see also, we are trending down now. Our positivity rate is at about 6.8%. When I was up here, I think it was in January, we were at 21%. So this is the efforts of many people in our community, so thank you to everyone. This helps. Here's some vaccination information. Basically, we have so far up till now, we have vaccinated 775 employees at 4 clinics. I will say that Jevelyn just walked in, and her team, they're working around the clock, and I just want to say thank you to call people. We're working closely with our health departments, Novant, and anyone else that is calling us to say, we have vaccines, would you like them? And we're taking them. And so basically, it's then around the clock. I will say at this part is that we're having to call people with, or email people with really quick turnaround times, and we apologize for that, but that's the state of where we are. By the time we find out how many vaccines we have and where we're going to do the clinics, it just takes time. We have to quickly turn this around. So thank you to our teachers and our other staff members that are getting called, honestly, in some cases within a day's notice. And so it may be even shorter today, possibly. So here are some other opportunities this week. We have Novant on February 24th, which is tomorrow, all day, supporting vaccinations. And on Saturday, from 8:30 to 6, we will be vaccinating 1,500. I believe the Novant Health one is about 300. Is that correct? I think on...
They actually couldn't give us the exact number.
Okay. They gave us time slots. Yay. We'll fill them up as we get them. So to the letter that you read, Chair Woodbury, it is correct. To get 1,500 on one day for our educators is something to celebrate. And so we're going to move this ahead. We're going to move it ahead much faster at this rate. PPE. I just wanted to take a minute to highlight a group that actually just donated 30,000 masks to our schools and delivered them, and that was Community for Safe Schools. They literally gave us 30,000. Wake Forest Baptist Health actually was donated them, but they organized the entire process and got them to our schools. And they are the KN95 masks for those employees that want to wear them. They're obviously not mandatory, but they're now in the front office at every school for employees that want to wear them. And then desk shields. Tomorrow, our operations department will begin installing the plexiglass desk shields for teachers that have asked for those at their desks. And then we also have other stock. We have a warehouse of stock for folks that need anything. We have the materials in our warehouse. So that's the first part, just for a very quick update about county health, vaccines, some of the PPE. Any questions before I move to the next section? Yes?
The first slide, when you had the positive cases from
Yes.
the students, can you break that down to how many are elementary, middle, and high school?
We could. It's in the data because the data is captured by school. We didn't for tonight, and I don't know it off the top of my head, but we could.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah, this is, yes, hi.
Yes, hi there.
Ms. McManus, this is Elizabeth. And how is the contact tracing going at this point when a student or staff member reports a positive case? How quickly are people being contacted?
So it is going, it should be, honestly, it's the same day. They report it to their COVID coordinator, and then they start to, they basically see if the person was in the building, then it starts the process to see were there any close contacts following the guidelines, CDC guidelines. And so really, those people would be notified, honestly, within the same day if they need to quarantine. Our processes are getting better and better as we go. Our district contact tracing team is also now more established. And so it has definitely improved.
Are we keeping up with the changing guidelines as days in quarantine get reduced by the CDC and our local health department? Are we keeping up with that?
So we have not yet. I will tell you, and we meet, again, I've said this so many times, we meet as a contact tracing team at the end of every day, and we have not changed our protocol to match the health department. The health department has lessened the number of days to quarantine. We have kept ours if you're exposed to 14. They've gone to 10, and then it might even be a little bit less than 10. So we have not changed our internal process yet.
Okay, that's what I was wondering.
Yeah, so, yes. So here we go. Employee data, very quickly. So this is the substitute slide again, but I've made some, I wanted you all to know. So really, although we have 977 subs on a roster, we are at a 62.52 fill rate, just so you know. So that means many positions aren't being filled. And so what I want to show you today is kind of how we're supporting the filling of classrooms so that students actually have a teacher that are teaching them. And so basically there's several ways. We're all in this together district coverage program, and this is where central office staff have volunteered, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that on another slide. We have provided additional compensation for teachers taking on additional students in their caseload, and that's virtually, or classes being covered, them giving up their planning period to cover classes. They're getting extra pay for that. And so right now, just since we started this on January 21st, we have approximately 232 teachers that have actually provided COVID-related coverage in their own building during that time. So a very special thanks to our teachers and our TAs. TAs are being compensated to sub up. And so that's another thank you to our TAs. So I will tell you, it is definitely a hands-on-deck approach. It is not easy. Our schools, our people are working tirelessly, but they're doing whatever it takes to meet the needs of our students. So just so you know a little bit more about, we're all in this together. We launched this actually yesterday. Monday was the 22nd, Monday. 200 central office staff signed up to provide coverage starting yesterday through June 4th. And it's a total of 51 in-school days. Wednesdays obviously are not included, but each date has a minimum of 15 slots that we have filled. And I got a really great email yesterday from a principal saying, thank you so much, because she now has her coverage for quarantine. And the coverage is not just, I'm sick today or I'm going out on maternity leave. This is specifically related to COVID, so really mostly quarantines. Any questions about that section?
Just thank you. It's excellent. Thank you for all your
You're
hard
welcome.
work.
And I'm sorry, I keep having to adjust my, these are the masks that I always wear because they stay put perfectly. And I'm very sorry tonight, I'm having to adjust it. I don't know. I washed it, so maybe it shrunk, I guess. But I'm sorry, here we go. Information from the state. Now to go to a larger perspective. So I've given kind of a county perspective, our district and what's happening. And now we've been getting a lot of information from the state lately. And so I just wanted to give you a quick update on a few items. So first of all, the toolkit. So here's a summary of the updates. It basically, and all those that watch the governor saw when he is encouraging students in grades K to 12 to return to in-person instruction 5 days a week to the fullest extent possible. And that is what the toolkit is now saying. Even though we are still able to implement Plan A or Plan B, and through Plan A or Plan B, we are supposed to continue to provide social distancing in common areas, in hallways, through all the markings, and so none of that would change in the revised toolkit. Here are some other updates, and these are actually a couple of significant changes. Kindergarten through 5th grade students are no longer required in the toolkit to adhere to those in-person social distancing requirements in the classroom. So that is how many of other districts that have been back K-5, that's how they make that happen. Because if you actually try to do the 6 feet with, 17, 18 kids in some of our smaller classrooms, that's difficult. And so that has actually been lifted in the next guidance. Now, 6 through 12, it's still the 6 feet, just so everyone knows that has not changed in the guidance. And then it gives you what is possible on a school bus. Now, there is another bill that right now we are waiting to hear what happens with that bill. And it's with the governor, and so if he doesn't do anything with it, it'll pass. He could still veto it, but this is really about, number one, requiring schools to comply with all requirements in the toolkit, and number two, making sure that our students that have IEPs or 504 plans actually have the opportunity to attend in-person learning the full amount of time, the full amount, the 5 days a week preferably. And so basically, we are required to have an in-person instruction. So if this passes, those districts that have decided that they're staying remote, most of them are actually already making plans for how they're going to get students back in schools. Other part of this, parents will still have a choice, families still have a choice. So every boards must provide the remote option to continue throughout this school year. Nothing has been said about next school year with a remote option. But this year, it definitely says that we need to provide that option the remainder of the school year. So basically, a quick summary of this. We are moving faster with getting employees vaccinated. That is a great thing for us. The governor has recommended that all students return to in-person instruction 5 days a week. K-5, minimal social distancing, middle and high, following the social distancing guidelines. So this is important to know as I provide an actual recommendation for us as we move forward. Number one, most of the surrounding districts have had their elementary kids back, and they're not splitting the days. They're not going 2 days only at the elementary level. We started with K-3 just because of those critical reading years, but honestly, 4th and 5th graders, when you look at our data, and I didn't bring data tonight, but I will at an upcoming meeting. We spent Monday during staff looking at a lot of data, from iReady to EOCs to grades, and so we'll bring that back to you. But basically, this is where we are. And as I talk to folks, you know, I don't want us to be a district that waits for legislation to pass, and now you got 15 days to do something. We need to get ahead of things and be leaders in this work. And we've shown that we are doing a really good job thanks to our employees, our parents, and our general community. So here, any questions, because I'm going to go into a recommendation. It's kind of comprehensive, so bear with me. So this is what I'm going to be recommending this evening, that we eliminate, so we start by eliminating just the cohorts at elementary. And this would not start right now. It would start March 8th would be just 4th grade, so we can see how many. We would be working for the next 2 weeks with schools to see how this can be done. Again, 4th elementary schools do not, the toolkit says you can adhere to, really no social distancing, but we would still work with our schools to adhere to a minimal social distancing. And we will do other things, like if we need to add death shields or other things, we can do that as well. March 15th, then do the same for 5th. Now, the 4 cohort, we only have 4 middle schools that are cohorted. If they can have 6-foot distancing in their classrooms, then we would want to change to 2. Okay? So, but I know that there are a lot of people wanting that to shift regardless, but we need to stick to our social distancing in classrooms at 6 through 12 according to our toolkit. People have asked me, well, how are other districts across the country doing all the way to 12th grade and they have all their kids back? It's because they don't have this guidance in the tool. They don't have these rules in their toolkit. So, I mean, an example is Florida. They don't have any of those requirements. So all their kids have been back all year, all the way to 12th grade. They have no social distancing. And that's, so we're focused on here, but people have asked me that. So basically, if we can do this, and we're going to work on it, and we have 3 weeks to try to do this, and the other cohorts would stay at 2. Now, this entire time, our principals are really analyzing their data. I know that one of our moms that got up today mentioned that there was 1 student in a classroom, and that is true in many cases. And that is why, once we have all 4 cohorts back, and we can add up the numbers of cohort 1 and 2, can they come 2 days, and cohort 3 and 4, can they come on the 2 days together? If we can do that, we are absolutely going to try to move forward on that. So March, my last, let me do the 4th bullet. So the students with IEPs, now this part of the recommendation I want us to pay close attention to. Work with students with IEPs and 504s to offer in person, elementary would already be back, but the 4 days a week. Now, on many things, you all have seen 5 days a week, but I am going to recommend that we stick with our 4 day a week, and this is why. Our teachers are having to plan concurrently. It is extremely complex. We need to give them that time to plan, that time to meet, that time to have our buildings continue to be cleaned. We don't want to kind of not do those things. And so I'm not recommending 5 days at this time. I'm recommending 4 so that we can continue on that day across the board. March 15th, then, it would be schools working with parents. Not every student with an IEP is going to want to take us up on this. So just know that. We know that. Some parents will say, you know what, nope, my child will stay with their cohort. But if there are parents with IEPs or 504s, the children, we want schools to work with them to be able to get them back the 4 days, because some of those learners are really struggling, in addition to others. And then the last part would be we would analyze our high school data and bring an update and recommendation to the March 16th COVID committee meeting. At that point, we'll have had all 4 cohorts. Our principals already know they're going to start truly digging into their numbers, and we will bring a recommendation that evening. All right, so basically, I know it's a lot of different components, and we can separate it out when we go to the vote, Chair Woodbury, or we can just do it as one recommendation. So that concludes my section. Any questions? My recommendation.
So on March 15th, the middle school cohorts, if they can move it from 4 to 2, it would be an individual per school.
No, well, I really do not see how that would be, it would depend on the class size, the rooms, and to say that one could go back because you have size, so we need to think through that. At this point, it is basically, if we can do the 6 feet in the classrooms, we will bring them back. And it's all all 4 schools at this point.
Okay.
So I'm not saying that we cannot look at that, but at this point, I worry that because of the size of your facility or the size of your classrooms, and if you don't have another place to move kids to be able to do the 6-foot social distancing, that group of families is going to not be able to take advantage of this. So I don't know. And it really depends. And also, we're going to prioritize students with an IEP first. So those students will have the option to come back 4 days a week, IEPs and 504s.
Yeah.
And then we still need to see the room, the space. But that's our ultimate goal, is to get every student back. And I want to make sure that people realize that. That is definitely our ultimate goal, to have all of our students back. So just bear with us as we actually look at our data, and we will do everything in our power to make it work, to get everybody down to, the goal would be everybody down to 2. So then students could actually be in school 2, 4, 6, 8, at least 8 days a month instead of, what was it, 4? 4.
Yeah, I think that's great. Thank you.
So looking ahead, and parents are already talking about the school year 2021, 2022, and trying to make decisions about if they're going to stay in Winston-Salem, Forsyth County schools. When, or do we have an answer for them as far as if school will be in person for next year?
So, and I know we have really, as a team and as with anyone else, started talking about next year, other than what I tell everyone is, I'm predicting that everyone will have their vaccines. Our community spread will be down. It's going down every day. It's predicted to be at 5% by this weekend. I feel like we should be planning for in-person instruction next school year. Okay, so I'm saying that because that is my belief, and that is my goal, and working with our team and with our board and with our teachers. Obviously, we want to get to that place, for sure. And so I'm going to say right now, everyone be thinking in person. So,
I think Board Member Motsinger has her hand up.
yes.
Board Member Motsinger, do you have your hand up?
Yeah, my question or concern was that I'm hoping that out of the experience of virtual academies, that we will find a way to keep that as an option for those families where it has been really successful long-term. In particular, I think it will be really, first, there are students who have really thrived under this, and I would like to keep that as an option for them. And also for students who, for whatever discipline reasons, can't be in the buildings, I think it would be really helpful to end long-term suspensions by always having a virtual option for our students.
Yes. So yes,
because we could totally eliminate that as causing the end of children's educations.
absolutely. There's so many possibilities, Board Member Motsinger. I will tell you that Virtual Academy is here to stay. We will continue offering that as the option next year. If for those kids that want to stay remote and are thriving in that environment, they can go to Virtual Academy. We do not foresee at this time having teachers do concurrent. We still have great use for the cameras. I can promise you we can use them for many things. We talked about that after that big expense. But that kind of instruction is not completely ideal. And so for sure, we will keep the Virtual Academy option and continue to grow that program as we have stakeholders, students that actually want to learn virtually. But to your point about using virtual options to reduce suspensions or to, allow kids to continue learning, we love that. Expulsions, absolutely. every kid needs to be staying in school, period. So, yes, thank you.
Absolutely. And I just feel like it becomes a really good option for anybody where it's not safe for them to be in the building for other students.
Right,
But that they need to continue their education. We should graduate everybody.
absolutely.
I think Board Member Jones had
Thank
a.
you.
Thank you.
So with the, so I'm happy to see that, we're trying to bring understanding that students don't want to just be in the classroom by themselves, and trying to figure out how to bring the cohorts maybe together if that's possible. For high school students, and I realize they're just coming back, so it's hard to see, but would there be any way to look at that data and even, the only reason I say that is that the March 23rd meeting is basically there at the end of the month. And so would there be a way to take action quicker after the March 16th COVID meeting, instead of waiting for the next time?
I wonder if we could, have we been able to in the past, Dion, add something if all the board members are at the COVID meeting, that we could actually take action that evening? We've done that before, yes or no?
It depends on what the meeting is noticed for.
Okay.
I guess if it's possible, you could call a meeting if there's all the board members there, but we would just have to look at how we notice it to make sure that
Okay.
we don't violate open meetings.
Okay.
Yeah, basically, if we take action, if there were to be some type of action to allow for more high school students to be in
Yeah.
person and adjust those, you're basically looking, into April.
Right.
And then, we're talking about spring breaks and
Right.
things like that. And so, I'm really hearing an outcry from those high school students who are, those who want to be in the building, really want to be in the
Yep.
building. And so they're the ones who have really kind of, I think, gotten probably the biggest short end of the stick. And if there was a way that we could move that up, I would be in favor of that.
Yeah.
And they have some preliminary numbers from, not just from yesterday's attendance, but who has signed up. I know
Yeah.
in 2 of my daughter's classes yesterday, there were no more than 3 students in each class, so.
Yep. And really, so yes, to answer your question, next week, cohorts 3 and 4 come back. Really, after this week, after these 4 days, you would be able to know, could you combine those cohorts pretty well? The thing is that we have to also remember is, I think as more kids can come, more kids will want to come. So just know that, that's what we think. As more students come into our classrooms, more will want to come. But honestly, by the 4th 9 weeks of school, because the last 9 weeks starts, I think, March 26th or something like that. It's that last week. So I have no problem if we say, let's March 16th at that meeting, let's bring the recommendation. And if we are able to notice it and move forward on a recommendation, we do that so that students could actually start right at the last 9 weeks. And that's been kind of a goal the whole time, is how do we get the most amount of kids back that last 9 weeks? And then I will tell you, our summer program, and Nicolette's going to be coming forward. She's mentioned a little bit, but we're going to have a pretty amazing summer program. So we're hoping many of our students take advantage of that. So it's almost like a continuation. I know that doesn't sound very exciting for seniors, but I will tell you, it is going to be exciting. We'll make it exciting. We'll make it worth your while. So, yeah.
Thank you, Ms. McManus.
Thank you.
The last item on our discussion is the selection of superintendent. Our General Counsel, Dion Jenkins, will lead us into this discussion.
Good evening,
Good
Chair
evening.
Woodbury, members of the board, and Interim Superintendent Ms. McManus. Upon the departure of Dr. Angela Harrison, as you know, the board took action to appoint Tricia McManus as your interim superintendent. Initially, the term of that contract was for a period of 3 months, and that contract has expired. It actually expired on the 15th of February. You have had some discussions about how to proceed, and those discussions have occurred in closed session, which you're allowed to do pursuant to North Carolina law because it's a personnel matter. But the purpose of the discussion tonight is for you all just to have open discussion about how you would like to proceed with that decision. And I'm happy to take any questions that you may have. So I will yield the floor to you all at this time.
So I will start by just saying, on behalf of the board, we have spent the last 4 months observing the work of Ms. McManus in her current role as our interim superintendent of Winston-Salem Forsyth County Schools. It is often said that the best predictor of future success is prior performance. It is a proven track record, behaviors, and motivations that we believe lead to the best hire. Our board believes Ms. McManus has demonstrated the characteristics and behaviors we are looking for in a superintendent based on her prior roles and during the last 4 months. We need solid, proven, continuous leadership right now. This board has offered Ms. McManus a 28-month contract as the superintendent of Winston-Salem Forsyth County Schools. Any other questions or discussion at this time?
Chair Woodbury, I would just like to say, I think Rhonda Mays, who had a public comment earlier, reminded us that as a board, we have, and as a community, it has not been that long since we went through the process pre-COVID, where we could have community meetings, where we could hear from expectations of what our community wanted, as well as assessments for what we wanted as a board. And I believe those things, I believe, are still relevant for our community. And having all of that knowledge and information and looking at Ms. McManus's track record, that I would say that she meets those qualifications, and it's not only by how she's demonstrated her work here, but what she's also done in the past. I believe that we also heard tonight that we needed someone who was empathetic, someone who was strong, someone who was a bipartisan decision maker. And I believe that myself and the entire board have seen that type of leadership from Ms. McManus. And so I feel like, as Chair Woodbury stated, that she is the right person to lead this district at the time. Since my time on the board, we've had several leaders in the district, and I believe that honestly all of them at that particular time brought a very select skill set and personality that really benefited the district at that time. And so I believe right now where we are in Winston-Salem Forsyth County Schools, with this and with our community as well, Ms. McManus is really the perfect leader for our district.
I would like to say that I completely agree with everything that Dana just said and Chair Woodbury initially. And just to add that we have spent 4 months observing and really seeing what she has done as an interim. And in visiting schools, I can't tell you, I think every single school I've ever gone to, that the teachers, support staff, principals have come up and it really expressed how much they appreciate her work, how she supports them, the management style of Mrs. McManus, and just the positive feelings that they have of her, and how they have increased, the trust level and the transparency in the district have really increased. And she has a philosophy of children first, and that's just really shown through all that she has done, and her wonderful style and her listening, her ability to really connect with everybody on every level. And she's just very authentic. And so I think that she would be a perfect leader for our district.
I agree with the following board members that have said really good things about, hopefully, our next superintendent. I feel like any time that I've called and asked to speak with Tricia. She has done her darndest, no matter where she was or what she was doing, to get back to me as soon as possible. I think that going into schools, when she's got the worst time in the world for anybody to come on as a superintendent, and she has handled it so darn well. I have not had one teacher, one TA, or anyone that works in our school to say anything but good things about Tricia. I raise my hand. I can't think of anything better than to have her as our next superintendent.
There are no more questions or discussion. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to let people go if they wanted to go. So I admittedly have had less time than my colleagues to get to know Ms. McManus and work with her as a board member. However, when I was attending board meetings as a community member, she introduced herself to me when she came to the district, and has just been, I think, fantastic just ever since. But I have been involved in the selection of, leaders of organizations as sort of large as this one prior, and I'm also a student of history, and I like to kind of go back to I like to use the Titanic as an example for why having the best leader is important, and I'll tell you why. I think at the end of the day, lives are at stake, right? Just like they were then, and I don't think it's hyperbole to say that, because there's plenty of literature out there that provides both frameworks and empirical evidence that education is a fundamental social determinant of health. So if you don't have the right person in place, literally, the implications are clear. It'll be 110 years next year that the Titanic has sank, and more than 1,500 passengers died out of about a crew of 2,200 or so. And there are a couple main reasons why the Titanic sunk. And the first is that the builders of the Titanic tried to cut costs. There were 20 lifeboats, which was the legal minimum at the time, despite warnings that, that wasn't enough lifeboats. I think in 1985, when they first found the Titanic, they discovered that it was broken into 2 places, and that there were some issues with the rivets that hold the hull together. So although we don't have a lot of control over how much we get as a district in terms of finances, we do have a little bit of control over how that's spent. And so we need a superintendent who will make recommendations to the board relative to fiscal allocations that will keep the ship afloat, right? The next piece is that the Titanic was going way too fast. 22 knots is too fast to be moving through heavy iceberg infested waters in the North Atlantic. And some believe that the captain was actually trying to beat a record of another ship to get to New York. And so we're in need of good, strong leadership that's sort of devoid of any type of arrogance or, sense of self-importance. Someone who's going to be empathetic towards the needs of our community and the various constituencies of that community. The last piece is that, it really tried to turn too late, right? Mm-hmm. By the time the iceberg was in view, it was too late. And actually, I just recently read that there were no binoculars. Nobody had any binoculars. And you really need someone with the experience to understand the warning signs and to make determinations early on so that you can avoid catastrophe. And so what I've seen in my 2 weeks as a board member and, in my efforts and work prior is that Ms. McManus is the person who can do this. I also think that consistency is extremely important. Mm-hmm. Over the past 2 years, this district has had, it's a little bit over 2 years, but over the past couple of years, this district has had 3 superintendents. It's important now more than ever for students that we have consistency, but also for faculty, for staff, and for all of the members of our community that we have someone who's kind of just in place, that we don't, get our community mired in a search process that can drag on for months. So that's sort of where I'm coming from in terms of my support for Ms. McManus.
Thank you, Mr. Bohannon. Well said. You know, I'm a student of history too, so I was all engaged. I loved it.
Chair Woodbury, if I could just say briefly, I'm a firm believer that 4 months of on-the-job observation is worth more than any afternoon session of interviewing at the DoubleTree. So.
Yes. Well, I will speak my piece as well, since I'm the only one who hadn't spoken, but I would agree with this, and what I really like about Ms. McManus is her passion for children, her passion to see all children succeed, and the drive she has for doing that. And I think that anybody who, during this time of COVID, where I think we've all kind of just gotten in a funk, or at least I have, she's risen above that, and she still has that passion and the desire to do what's great for students and to move students forward. And so I just really appreciate that. So.
Thank you. The next item
Ms.
on.
Woodbury,
Oh,
Ms.
I'm
Motzinger
sorry.
has her hand
Oh,
up.
I'm sorry. Sorry, Ms. Motzinger.
Yeah. Yes, this is Elizabeth. And what I would like to say is I think that our district is upright but bruised. I think that the last year has been extremely challenging for everybody, for students, for staff, for families, all across the board. It has been really challenging. And Ms. McManus is a deeply kind and caring person who has immersed herself deeply into relationships with people in our district, not just generic relationships, but the real people who work in our district. And I am hoping that the next year will be one of enormous healing and restoration and new beginnings for all of us. So I welcome Trish.
Thank you, Board Member Motzinger. The next item, thank you, Ms. Jenkins. The next item on our agenda is action items, and the first. Oh, okay, okay. Okay, sorry. Yeah, because it was a discussion. I have it as an action, but not as a discussion. Thank you. So, yes, thank you.
Good evening, Chair Woodbury.
Good
Board,
evening.
And I'll go ahead and say it, Superintendent McManus. I didn't say it very well. So as this board may recall, the current 2021 school year was scheduled to be Winston-Salem Police Department's last year with our SRO program. However, due to COVID and the unknown needs of our district, the Winston-Salem Police Department exited early at the end of last school year, and also due to the fact that we had no idea what our SRO needs would be this current year. The Forsyth County Sheriff's Office was held to last year's staffing pattern, and that was of 16 SROs, 2 corporals, 1 sergeant, and 1 lieutenant, with 20 total staff, even though they were given an additional 13 schools that were added from the Winston-Salem Police Departments. So as we prepare for next year, we know for sure that the Forsyth County Sheriff's Office will need at least 13 officers to cover the schools that were vacated by the Winston-Salem Police Department and the addition of a new middle school in Louisville. So what I'm bringing for you tonight is an amendment to the current 2021 SRO contract for an additional $358,145 to be paid in the fourth quarter. These additional funds will allow the Forsyth County Sheriff's Office to pre-hire and train those 13 officers in preparation for the coming 21-22 school year. And this $358,000 will be paid from dollars not spent in the current SRO budget due to our COVID staffing patterns. If there's any questions?
Well, I just had I understand. I think I can, follow what you're saying, but I'm just curious as to why we're putting it on the agenda tonight and then asking for action tonight instead of, is there a rush, or was there a timeline or a meeting? I'm just trying to figure out the timing, because normally something like that would probably come to us at a work session and then we would vote for it tonight. So I'm just curious, because I think for transparency to our community as well, why is it not on the agenda at all, and then kind of ask for a discussion and a vote, just so that everyone understands that, because that's,
So I guess I can speak for part of that. So we had a discussion with the sheriff's office a week or so ago, and I think it's probably my error that it was not placed on for discussion, and that's why you're seeing it at the last minute. So the sheriff's office, in fairness to them, they need to get moving on these hires. So it was not an effort to put it on at the last minute. It was basically, I thought it was being handled a different way until tonight.
I understand that. I just think that's a fair question to ask, and our community needs to understand why. So it's not like we're something that they haven't had a chance to comment on or anything like that. So, and thank you for the honest answer.
Yes, ma'am.
I think Board Member Motzinger has her hand up.
Yes, thank you. I'm sorry, I'm trying to remember, is this for one SRO in the high schools and middle schools, or is this, I know last year we increased the number of SROs.
So, Board Member Montsinger, I think that's a fair question. This staffing pattern right here that we're bringing to hire the 13 would just be one in each school. Now,
Okay.
But I can't speak for what the Sheriff's Department would ask for moving forward. It's very possible that they may present, additional staffing with supervision. Obviously, would probably need to increase, but that would be addressed in next year's budget proposal and negotiations with the Sheriff's Office. But this would get them to just one officer per middle and per high school.
Thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am. Any other questions?
Thank you. Now, the next item on our agenda is the action items. The first action item is to consider approval of the Alphabet's after-school program contract. Is there a motion?
Move approval.
Any further questions or discussion?
I have one.
Yes.
So just to clarify that the facilities usage monthly fee will be $500 with Alphabet, just as it is for imprints and the Y. Okay, thanks.
If there are no further questions or discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries. The next item is to consider approval of the waiver of the Winston-Salem Forsyth County Schools 2.0 GPA requirement in policy 6145.
Go, Leah.
Any further question or discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. The next item is to consider approval of the revised resolution regarding stormwater maintenance at Paisley Lawrence Middle School.
Motion to approve?
Second.
Any further questions or discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. The next item is to consider approval of the use of state CRF funds to complete the installation of the bipolar ionization in our Winston-Salem Forsyth County School facilities.
Motion to approve?
Second.
Any questions or discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. The next item is to consider approval of Insight Human Services.
Move approval.
Second.
Any further question or discussion?
Yeah, this is Elizabeth. My concern is that I'm hoping going forward that it's not about 50% testing and 50% services, and I would hope we could revisit that.
Any further Thank you, Board Member Montsinger. Any further question or discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Board Member Montsinger, we didn't get your vote.
I am abstaining. Thank you.
Thank you. The next item is to consider approval of budget amendment number 1 and transfer number 1.
Move approval.
Second.
Any further question or discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. The next item is to consider approval of compensation project for our custodians.
Second.
Any further questions or discussions? All in favor? Any opposed?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. The next item is to consider approval of the design contract for J.F. Kennedy High School renovations.
Move approval.
Second.
Any further questions or discussions? All in favor? Any opposed? Thank you. Motion carries. The next item is to consider approval of the new Louisville Middle School activity bus purchase.
Move to approve.
Second.
Any further question or discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. The next item is to consider approval of the maintenance operations site assessment.
Move approval.
Second.
Any further questions or discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. The next item is to consider approval of the summer program retesting.
So moved.
Second.
Any further question or discussion?
Yes, I have a question, Chair
Yes.
Woodbury, sorry. So the dates, those are for retesting, and that's only children who apply, which will be a little more this year probably than we have had in previous years. Two questions, I suppose. When children take their EOGs, are they going to have to come back to the classroom to take those, or can they do? Are you going to give us some clarification, Mr. Craig?
Sure, yes, ma'am. Ms. Barker, the state does require that those are administered in person, so yes, those students would come back to the classroom if they so choose.
So, okay, if they so choose. So they're not required to come back into the classroom for EOCs and EOGs? They are required, correct?
At the end of the year, the expectation is that our students will return and take those EOGs and EOCs, yes, ma'am.
Are we going to, will we have to have a plan for social distancing and all that kind of good stuff?
will,
And can, I
yes.
mean, do they all have to be done on the same day? I'm just looking forward for all that, because
Sure.
I know there's some angst out there among our principals
Sure.
as to how that's going to be
That's right.
administered this year.
Yeah, the state has not extended the test window at this point. So for our elementary and middle schools, we have 10 days at the end of the school year to administer that test. For our high schools, we have 5 days. And we're already making plans for how we're going to administer those at the end of the year right now.
Okay, and I guess with the retesting, if we have an over amount at any one school, that we'll have to deal with that as well once we see those numbers.
That's exactly right. We know that retesting will be a lower number than during the normal testing window. And so, yes, we'll have to make plans to accommodate social distancing during that time.
Okay, thank you for that clarification, because I know there's some angst out there, so as soon as, it'd be nice if the state would do differently, but.
It would be nice, that's right.
But not right now, right?
No word on that yet. At this point, we know that we're proceeding with the administration of EOGs and EOCs.
I do have a question about an email I thought I read today with federal guidelines around testing, that students would be able to actually have an option to take the test on site or at home, and then the encouragement, I don't want to say encouragement, but the allowance of states to allow LEAs to use a version of the assessment to kind of scale it down. Did I read something, maybe it's in progress and they haven't passed, or where are we with that?
Yes, ma'am. Good question, Chair Woodbury. There was a memo that came from the federal government today that we received, and that memo indicates that states are allowed to apply for a waiver for the accountability. So that is not for testing. Right? We can't apply for a waiver to not test, but the accountability measures, for example, school performance grades, we can apply for a waiver, and that memo seems to indicate that the federal government will probably approve that waiver. Does that answer? Oh, and then you're right, the memo did indicate some wording regarding administration of that remotely. But our state is going to have to come up with a plan, if they so choose, but at this point, there is no plan to administer those assessments remotely. There are security issues with that, and so then the cost of rewriting a test. So we don't know if our state's going to create a plan for administering those remotely or not yet.
thank you. Any further question or discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Board Member Montsinger, we didn't get your vote.
I'm an aye.
Okay, thank you. The next item is to consider approval of policy 5127, graduation requirements.
Move approval.
Second.
Any further questions or discussion?
Yes, ma'am, Chair Woodbury,
Yes.
sorry. I know it's late, but anyway, I do need to give an update.
Okay, good.
As the curriculum committee chair, I was a little upset with this after we had our curriculum committee meeting. So, anyway, long story short, I called DPI and we had a meeting. Nicolette set that up with some folks as well through technology and all that, because I was convinced that we were not unique in our half credits and that we were, that we were, well, the bottom line was I felt that we were going to inhibit children's choices and things with this having to be done. It's Power School driven, and we are unique in our half credits. The reason we did that is because when we merged our 7-period day and our block schools, we did that to try to be able to come up with a schedule that could be equitable, as well as our career center. It helps in scheduling children to our career center, which, I think is that people don't understand our career center and how difficult it is to schedule children to go there. So anyway, long story short, after a long meeting with DPI, about an hour, they are going to try to help maybe, and Nicolette, have you heard anything back from that at all? They were going to try to help us transition and possibly give us some leeway since we're already in the registration process. You want to give them an update on that?
So I did hear back. They are going to try to give us some leeway with some of our local electives, but they're going to give us the specific codes for the specific classes they're going to give us leeway for. We do have to make the adjustments for any AP, IB, CTE courses immediately. And so Debbie Harmon and our team are working on that right now. A lot of the changes that we're doing will not impact student choices or schedules. It just will give students the correct amount of credits that they require. So we're working on that.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. That's right. But anyway, so we did have some good discussion with DPI and all that. And I think, it'll be fine. I think our instructor-wise, because PE, it's probably going to hopefully be a wash, but as Brad Oliver and Karen Garman will give us a report to see how that works out after children register and all that, and make sure it doesn't impact staffing. But anyway, that's just an update. And once again, I don't always. I understand why that came down from the state and why DPI has to do that, but I don't always agree with it. But it's a necessary evil, so that's just an update.
Thank you, Board Member Parker. Any further question or discussion? All in favor? Any opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries. The next item is to consider approval of changes to credit offerings.
Move approval.
Second.
Any further questions or discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Board Member Miles?
I'm an aye.
Okay, thank you. Motion carries. The next item is to consider approval of the COVID-19 recommendation.
Move to approve.
Second.
Any further question or discussion?
Just one
Yes.
question for the superintendent. So relative to the elementary schools not having to adhere to the social distance, I'm noticing in elementary schools that teachers sometimes have tape on the floor that kind of is their kind of safe space. Are they going to be able to maintain that in their classrooms?
So
or-
the tables where students sit on the ends and then we put the plexiglass, or?
Well, like so if you go into a classroom, they'll like the front part of it might be like taped off where students are not like in the expectation is that students don't cross that area. I just want to make sure, I mean, teachers are walking around, but like they like to have their.
Right, the teachers will still be able to have their space, as we've seen in many classrooms. And again, this is going to be worked out with the teacher, looking at their roster, how many kids are returning, to be able to figure out how to do this in a very safe way.
Okay, thank you.
Any further question or discussion? All in favor?
Yeah, Chair Woodbury?
Yes, ma'am.
This is Elizabeth.
Yes.
I did have a question. How clear are we about closing classrooms and/or schools if circumstances change? And how obvious are those policies? And the reason I say that is while I am very excited about the vaccine program, and I'm so happy to see the percentage positive going down in our community, and indeed it looks like we may indeed get below 5% this weekend or very soon. This is still such a dangerous disease, and we've had more deaths in Forsyth County in February than any other month of the pandemic. And I just want to make sure that we're so very clear when classes will go into quarantine, when schools will close down, and make sure that our community understands that we're not out of the woods. We're doing the best we can, but this is still a serious disease, and there could indeed be reversals.
Did you want me to respond? Absolutely. We will continue making decisions. Again, it's a daily analyzation of data, what's happening, and those decisions are made daily. If a classroom has to close, a few weeks ago, we did close a school for a period of time. And so we will continue to follow our protocols, Board Member Motzinger.
So I just want to make sure that is available and clear to people ahead of time so that they understand it.
Okay.
And are not shocked if it happens.
Okay, we'll continue, we'll message it.
Thank you.
Any further question or discussion? All in favor? Any opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries. The next item is to consider approval of the superintendent contracts.
Move to approve. Second?
Any further question or discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. The last item is to consider approval of the SRO contract. That's very kind. The next item is to consider approval of the SRO contract adjustment with the Sheriff Department.
Move to approve.
I think you're second because Board Member Park, okay. Any further questions or discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. The next item is our consent agenda items. Is there a motion to approve these items?
Move approval. Second.
There are no further questions or discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries. The next item is the superintendent update and board announcements.
So I did not prepare a PowerPoint tonight. I will be very brief. I just wanted to make a very quick statement. And as I always do when I want to make sure I am very clear on my thoughts, I just wrote something very quickly, if you don't mind.
Yes.
First of all, I do want to say thank you to the board for allowing me to serve as superintendent of Winston-Salem Forsyth County Schools. I am going to tell you we will meet the goals of the strategic plan. I have no doubt at all. The goals that Effie shared tonight, I am 100% committed, as well as is our team, as well as are the educators in every one of our schools. We will meet those goals. In the last 9 months, this is what I've witnessed in the district. I've been here since June 1st. I have witnessed very hardworking and absolutely brilliantly amazing students. I have witnessed dedicated and talented staff throughout schools, throughout district departments, driving school buses, just amazingly talented folks. I have witnessed very supportive parents. I have witnessed a very committed Board of Education and a vested community who all have one interest at heart, and that is the success of our students and our school district as a whole. It's an honor to be able to work with all of the educators throughout our district and our committed community to transform the educational experience we provide and the outcomes we achieve for every one of our students. I am deeply committed to working with you all to achieve the rigorous goals set forth in our strategic plan, and I have no doubt that together we can do this. In closing tonight, thank you for providing me the opportunity to lead our district from good to great, and not just great, but to absolutely outstanding. We have the ingredients to be the top performing district in North Carolina and to achieve ultimate success for the 54,000 students we serve. And I will tell you something you may not see at me on a daily basis is I am extremely competitive. So being the top performing district is definitely on the list. It's on the radar, and we're going to move in that direction. I promise to bring my very best self every day, and I have no doubt that all of you will bring yours. Together, we will help our students achieve the successes they deserve through the very highest quality of education possible. And so I look forward to working with all of you, and thank you again for the opportunity.
Thank you. I do have a few meeting announcements. On Thursday, February the 25th at 5 p.m., our Hispanic Advisory Board meeting will be held, of course, virtually. The recording will be available through the Social Studies Department page on our website on Thursday, March 4th at 5 p.m. The African American Advisory Board meeting will be held, and it also will be recorded, and you can access that recording through the Social Studies Department page on our website. Then on March 10th, I don't know what day that is on, the Equity Advisory Committee will meet from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. And I will say thank you so much to our board assistant, Ms. Lisa Sugg. She has recently sent out all of the advisory committee meetings to the board members so that we can be cognizant of trying to make those meetings as well. The next item is meeting open to the public. We do not have, unfortunately, any comments tonight, so we'll move to the adjournment. And I will just lastly say that this concludes tonight's meeting. Thank you for being with us, and please check our webpage for a complete list of upcoming committee and other public meetings. Good night and have safe travel. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
If there are no further question or discussion, let it be known by aye.
Thank you for joining us on your school channel, Cable 2.